Antifa's bad, really bad.
In the past year, it seems like Antifa has been everywhere. Building burned down in Minnesota? Antifa. Looting in Soho? Probably Antifa. Capitol violently overrun by people wearing MAGA hats? Definitely Antifa in disguise. And while we've been told that Antifa is a well-organized, well-funded network of violent extremists, historian Mark Bray says that's not it at all.
It's a radical left politics of opposition to the far right that doesn't rely on the police or the courts or the state to stop the fascist threat.
When black lives are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back!
Sometimes I compare it to feminism, right? There are feminist groups, but feminism itself is not a group. There are Antifa groups, but Antifa itself is not a group. Anti-fascism, broadly speaking, goes back as far as fascism. Groups like the Arditi del Popolo, which oppose Mussolini's fascists, to groups like Anti-Fascist Action, which fought Hitler's Nazis in Germany, and many other anti-fascist forces in Europe and around the world.
Throughout World War II, fascists were pretty easy to spot. That became a little harder once they'd stopped wearing their brown shirts.
Many former fascists adjusted the language they used to describe their politics, adjusted the way they presented it, tried to sort of leech off of left-wing politics to make themselves more appealing. Anti-fascism, or Antifa, became this militant kind of rebirth of anti-fascism that refused to trust in the state or the government to stop the far right, and believed in pushing them out of public spaces from below, in football stadiums, in punk venues, in communities. The anti-fascist argument is that you don't let fascism grow in any kinds of public or cultural spaces. And so these battles have been going on in these venues for decades.
So like 5 years ago, yeah, there's a radical left, but I didn't think I never heard of the word Antifa. When did Antifa become a weapon, rhetorically speaking, for the right, saying, hey, like the leftists want to ruin the country?
Most of the left didn't really care in the early 2010s. Anti-fascism was considered a low priority. This started to change, though, with the growth of the alt-right, with Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And so that's when it started to be more well-known among the left, and it took off in mainstream conversation. You could see a first step with the punching of Richard Spencer on Trump's inauguration day, even more so with the protest against Milo Yiannopoulos in Berkeley, when there was mass property destruction to shut down his event. Antifa was in the news then, and then it was a fait accompli with Charlottesville, when a fascist killed Heather Heyer. I thought that was sort of the end of the story for a little bit as far as the mainstream was concerned, but then Donald Trump's conspiracy theory accusations during the George Floyd protests last year brought it back into the conversation, and now it's a staple of the right-wing boogeyman industry.
All the violence is with these black hooded thugs, Antifa.
Is there any indication that Antifa elements were involved in antagonizing insurrectionist acts in the riot at the Capitol, the violence that we've seen politically these days?
Not really. Antifa groups are not numerous enough, and their membership is not significant enough, and their political influence is not significant enough for them to have had a disproportionate role in what was the largest mass uprising the U.S. has seen in half a century.
The difference between people like us and Antifa and BLM, we respect the law. We were good people. The government did this to us. We were normal, good, law-abiding citizens, and you guys did this to us. We want our country back.
And all those stories about rich liberals like George Soros paying Antifa thugs to go stir shit up.
This kind of anti-authoritarian, bottom-up, direct action-oriented kind of organizing doesn't rely on a lot of money. Accepting a donation from a millionaire would be anathema to what the anti-capitalist politics are anyway.
I understand there are some people who are anti-fascists who reject the use of violence as a tactic. There are those who use violence as a tactic. Why specifically violence as an anti-fascist tactic when you're confronting fascists?
The Antifa argument is that you don't let Nazis or fascists take even the first step towards achieving power because it's easier strategically to stop them before they've gotten there. That's not to say that violence is necessarily the first step. Most of what Antifa groups do involves monitoring the far right, figuring out who their leaders are, tracking them across different social media platforms, and then doing whatever they can to shut down their ability to organize and grow and establish themselves in society.
Whose streets? Our streets! Whose streets? Our streets!
You can't just say violence equals violence. Why it's done, who it's done against, and in what context matters a great deal. There's a big difference between attacking people of color or queer and trans people because of their identities on the right side versus attacking those who do that to stop them from doing that. That's a big difference, even if you disagree.
Katherine, Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T, Renegade, the worthless Negro from Virginia, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy. Today's date, it is Negro Friday, November 28, 2025. So I have been told. The Katherine Massey Book Club, brand new book here at the Cows. Now, we just finished up Evelyn Williams' Inadmissible Evidence because Assata Shakur just passed away a few weeks, or I guess at this point a couple of months back, and we had already read her memoir. Thought it would be important just to recognize her passing, learn a little bit more about her life and times, and her aunt as well, Evelyn Williams, and her entire family down in the Wilmington, North Carolina area, as well as New Jersey. Now, when we read her memoir and even Evelyn Williams' book, I know some folks said, they were curious about more information in terms of about the prison break, what happened there, why didn't more of those details get published in those two books. As we were reading Evelyn Williams' book, and we got a little bit more details and found out about Silvia Baldini, white woman suspected racist, born in Italy. And this group, M19 of white people, not all white people is just racist, who helped get her out of prison and were doing all this other criminal activity at the time period, suspected in some of these bank robberies and such. When I went to try to find, hey, maybe there's more information about these folks, documentaries, books, all that sort of newspapers, I landed on a book that I already had. That book, Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol, The Explosive Story of M19, America's First Female Terrorist Group. Now they got Silvia Baldini right on the front cover of the book that I already had. Why did I have this book? Because we read Harry Dunn, Standing My Ground. Aren't we encroaching on January? We read Harry Dunn's Standing My Ground, and he briefly talked about previous episodes when white terrorists attacked the Capitol, bombed the Capitol, and he mentioned this M19 group briefly. I said, dang, because I had never heard of it. I went then and started digging, and I found this book and briefly thought about, maybe we should read this book right then to follow Harry Dunn's book, Standing My Ground. Obviously, we did not, but hey, time is right and exact. Maybe we were supposed to read that book right now. Keep in mind everything they've been saying about so-called Antifa. Maybe got some folks out there who think that we got a new current generation of white people who are not racist and down to support causes to replace white supremacy with justice. That is not my view. You do have lots of different incidents of white people who engage in violence and maybe even give some wacky rhetoric saying that, racism is not cool. John Brown, they might even throw Harriet Beecher Stowe in there. 1800s, 19th century, suspected race soldiers. And then you move forward a little bit. Some of the folks who were hanging around with W.E.B. Du Bois got him all and made him focus his attention on making sure that white women got an opportunity to vote. Then you move forward, the Weather Underground, Students for Democratic Society, all them, these groups will be mentioned in the text, but this is 60s, 70s, white people saying, hey, we're against Vietnam. Really, we don't want to go and be drafted. We don't want to go carry no gun, get old Cassius Clay, get him over there and make him do it. But saying they're against Vietnam and, maybe we were Dr. King too, but all that during this period. So it's been lots of different instances saying they're hippies and smoking dope and all. But it's lots of instances of white people saying we're not racist. They are against Donald Trump. I'm Antifa. I'm with you, George Floyd. I'm with the rest of the black folks. I'd even vote for Obama. I'm definitely ain't with no Trump, that sort of nonsense, saying that they're down with Antifa, that sort of thing. We can keep all that in mind. Even really the big one, not all white peoples is racist. Is this how the people who think that, hey, we do have some white people who don't practice racism, is this how they would behave? They're going and breaking Assata out of prison, or, hey, it's a lot of colored folks in greater confinement. Maybe they go down to Alligator Alcatraz and break out some of our dark cousins and such, maybe. I don't know. That is not my opinion. There are lots of examples of this, but we will keep that firmly in the forefront of our minds, since not all white peoples is racist, according to some. This is who we're talking about? Sylvia Baldini and the rest of her gang, some of them not even born in the U.S. These are the not racist white people. Okay. We'll think about all that as we read. Context of White Supremacy. This is the Katherine Massey Book Club. Do y'all remember they said the M19? Remember that? They told us last week in Evelyn Williams' book that they got that name from combining Minister Malcolm X's name or initials with Ho Chi Minh. Remember that? Not all white peoples is racist. Katherine Massey Book Club. Our book. Tonight we bombed the U.S. Capitol. Audio segment 1.
Tonight we bombed the U.S. Capitol. The Explosive Story of May 19th. America's First Female Terrorist Group. By William Rosenau. Read by Gabra Zachman. El sueño de la razón produce monstruos. Goya. May 19th Members and Associates. May 19th Communist Organization. Sylvia Beraldini, born December 12, 1947, a.k.a. Louise. Alan Berkman, born September 4, 1945, died June 5, 2009, a.k.a. Leonard Cohen, William Lunderman, Kenneth Abrams, David Levy. Timothy Adolph Blunk, born May 21, 1957, a.k.a. William Bassler, William J. Hammond. Donna Joan Borup, dates of birth used, August 5, 1952, March 5, 1947, April 10, 1950, a.k.a. Donna Ostapchuk. Marilyn Jean Buck, born December 13, 1947, died August 3, 2010, a.k.a. Delia Richards, Louise Harmon, Eve Mancuso, D. Judith Alice Clark, born November 23, 1949, a.k.a. Alex. Elizabeth Betty Ann Duke, born November 25, 1940, a.k.a. Bess J. Lunderman, Loretta Polo, Janice Adams. Linda Sue Evans, born May 11, 1947, a.k.a. Christine Porter, Louise Robinette, Catherine Orloff, Christine Johnson. Susan Lisa Rosenberg, born October 5, 1955, a.k.a. Elizabeth, Barbara Groden, Susan Knoll. Laura Jane Whitehorn, born April 16, 1945, a.k.a. Milagros Matese, Ann Morrison. The Family. Kuwaze Balagoon, formerly Donald Weems, born December 22, 1946, died December 13, 1986, a.k.a. Maroon. Cecilio Ferguson, born November 16, 1946, a.k.a. Chewy. Edward L. Joseph, born January 17, 1953, a.k.a. Jamal Baltimore, Jr. Sekou Odinga, formerly Nathaniel Burns, born June 17, 1944, a.k.a. Big Daddy. Tyrone Q. Ryson, born February 9, 1947, a.k.a. Ocedric Lalupe, Little Brother. Mutulu Shakur, formerly Gerald Wayne Williams, born August 8, 1950, a.k.a. Doc, Donnell Jackson. Materi Shabaka Sundiata, formerly Samuel Smith, born February 18, 1944, died October 23, 1981, a.k.a. Sonny. Others. Sundiata Akoli, formerly Clark Edward Squire, born January 14, 1937. Kathy Boudin, born May 19, 1943. David Gilbert, born October 6, 1944. William Morales, born February 7, 1950, a.k.a. Willie, Guillermo. Assata Shakur, formerly Joanne Deborah Chesimard. Dates of birth used: July 16, 1947, August 19, 1952, a.k.a. Sister Love, Cleo. Prologue. Washington, D.C., April 26, 1983. The U.S. National War College occupies a chunk of riverside real estate at Fort Leslie J. McNair. Up-and-coming military officers, diplomats, and spies from all over the world compete for coveted slots at the school, with its rich campus, complete with tennis courts, a bowling alley, and even a 3-hole golf course. In 1982, it was also an open base. No mandatory ID checks, no X-ray scanners, no security waving wands across visiting backsides. Anyone who wasn't obviously deranged or disorderly could expect to stroll in, hassle-free. The young couple who walked onto campus the afternoon of April 26th didn't appear outwardly disturbed. Maybe the woman stepped a little gingerly, as though she were carrying something fragile in her bulky purse, but they set off no alarms among the military personnel who they most likely passed as they headed toward Roosevelt Hall, a hulking granite and brick building named after the 26th U.S. president. The intentionally ordinary couple walked up to the front of the building. Their compatriots who had scoped out the place on a reconnaissance run had mentioned a large concrete planter just outside the front door. The planter was more than big enough for the bomb that was in the woman's purse. The raw materials for the bomb were simple enough. The whole rig fit compactly in a purse. The bomb had been built using stolen Hercules Unigel Tamp-Tite dynamite, a DuPont blasting cap, and a Westclox pocket watch used as a timer that was set to detonate later that night. At 9:45 p.m., a faint voice, probably pre-recorded, called the Pentagon and United Press International, lashed out about events in Central America, the military, and U.S. imperialism, and warned that an explosion would be coming in 15 minutes. The blast blew out windows in Roosevelt Hall and sent Fort McNair into lockdown mode. Nobody was hurt, but no one was meant to be. Rather, the bomb was intended to deliver a thunderous message. A group calling itself the Armed Resistance Unit, or ARU, took credit for the Roosevelt Hall attack. Shortly after the operation, the ARU issued Communiqué No. 1, which announced that the bombing was carried out to support the liberation movements fighting U.S.-backed regimes in Guatemala and El Salvador. El Salvador will win, the ARU predicted. Guatemala will win. The people of Latin America and the Caribbean will be free. U.S. imperialism will be defeated. The ARU wasn't a band of foreign terrorists. These revolutionaries were homegrown, and, as the communiqué made clear, they were fervently committed to fighting U.S.-backed war, fascism, and genocide. We inside the U.S. are in the belly of the beast, they wrote. The terrorists revisited the nation's capital later that year. On August 18th, the Armed Resistance Unit struck at another military installation, a computer center at the Washington Navy Yard. The FBI described the damage as massive. Then the ARU started plotting additional attacks, something that would strike at the heart of the American state. They decided on the gigantic domed structure that dominates the D.C. landscape, an off-white symbol of imperialism, and a building erected by slave laborers whose descendants lived nearby in Third World squalor. It would send a message that could not be ignored. Introduction. In 1981, President Ronald Reagan announced that it was morning in America. He declared that the American dream wasn't over, far from it. But to achieve that dream, the United States needed to lower taxes, shrink the size of the federal government, and flex its military muscles abroad. Some called his program the Reagan Revolution. Meanwhile, a tiny band of American-born, well-educated extremists were working for a very different kind of revolution. They'd spent their entire adult lives embroiled in political struggles, protesting against the Vietnam War, fighting for Black, Puerto Rican, and Native American liberation, and fighting against what they called U.S. imperialism, that is, U.S. military aggression, political domination, and economic exploitation, particularly in the Third World. Many of them had been close to, or involved in, the violent far-left scene during the late 1960s and early 1970s. They were part of the so-called Generation of 1968, a worldwide cohort that embraced drugs, sex, rock music, and revolutionary politics with equal enthusiasm. In the 1970s, a militant revolutionary ethos took hold in a substantial part of the American counterculture, wrote journalist Jeffrey Toobin. To a degree that is almost unimaginable today, the bomb became a common mode of American political expression. The Weather Underground organization was among the most notorious elements in this extremist scene. An offshoot of Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, possibly the largest left-wing student group in U.S. history, the Weather Underground, inspired by Third World revolutionaries, sought to foment domestic insurrection and confront U.S. imperialism from the inside and with force. In an early manifesto, Weather declared that, "We are within the heartland of a worldwide monster, a country so rich from its worldwide plunder that even the crumbs doled out to the enslaved masses within its borders provide for material existence very much above the conditions of the masses of people of the world." What was needed, Weather said, was the destruction of U.S. imperialism and the achievement of a classless world, world communism. The title of the manifesto, "You Don't Need a Weatherman to Know Which Way the Wind Blows," 1969, was taken from Bob Dylan's 1965 folk rock mega-hit, Subterranean Homesick Blues. Inside SDS, the Weather faction quickly earned a reputation for bellicosity, fanaticism, and strutting self-regard. The SDS chapter at the University of Wisconsin lashed back, declaring that you don't need a rectal thermometer to know who the assholes are. "We're tired of tiptoeing up to society and asking for reform," said Bill Ayers, a leader of the Weatherman faction. "We're ready to kick it in the balls." By the mid-1970s, Weather had taken credit for dozens of bombings of government and corporate buildings. Women were part of Weather. They were founders. They were members of its ruling Central Committee, also known as the Weather Bureau, and they were cadres in its underground cells. But while the group supported women's liberation in theory, Weather's largely male leadership was different in practice. The group's Smash Monogamy campaign, ostensibly designed to shatter repressive sexual paradigms, created new opportunities for male erotic aggression and domination. Weather Bureau member Mark Rudd, a leader of the SDS uprising at Columbia University in 1968, confessed in his memoirs that the campaign meant freedom to approach any woman in any collective, and I was rarely turned down. Such was the aura and power of my leadership position. Members were often subjected to hours-long criticism, self-criticism sessions, and these blistering collective critiques were often directed at women who Weather males saw as particularly headstrong and independent. Susan Stern, a former Weather member, recalled a 5-hour session in which she was charged with being individualistic, egotistical, self-centered, power-hungry, manipulative, monogamous, dope-crazed, sexually perverted, dishonest, counter-revolutionary, and arrogant. Weather took a hard line on motherhood. Women who appeared overly devoted to their babies were reprimanded for a purported lack of revolutionary commitment. And in some cases, children were taken from their mothers and given to other members of the group so they could refocus their energies on the cause. By the late 1970s, Weather was defunct. Most of the leadership, exhausted from nearly a decade on the run, surfaced from the underground, and those wanted on criminal charges surrendered to the authorities. Ultimately, Weather's clandestine enterprise had been a failure, wrote the journalist Brian Burrow. The group had failed to lead the radical left over the barricades into armed underground struggle. failed to fight or support the black militants they championed, failed to force agencies of the American ruling class into a single change more significant than the spread of metal detectors and guard dogs. Many other Vietnam-era radicals also called it quits and returned to graduate school, started careers, and re-entered ordinary American life. One left-wing militant observed that a lot of her comrades had already stopped being active or said they wanted to check out doing other kinds of non-revolutionary political work. To me, it looked like that choice led to becoming yuppies, professionals, and armchair activists. But pockets of militancy remained. In certain parts of New York, the Bay Area of California, Chicago, and Austin, Texas, a revolutionary sensibility still smoldered and sparked, as one participant recalled. One of these militants characterized herself as totally and profoundly influenced by the revolutionary movements of the 60s and 70s. The Weather Underground was gone, but she and just a few others vowed to continue the struggle, and to do so by any means necessary. "We lived in a country that loved violence," she said. "We had to meet it on its own terms." In 1978, some of the militants created a new organization to wage a war against imperialism, racism, and fascism. They derived the group's name from the birthday shared by two of their ideological idols, Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh, the May 19th Communist Organization. May 19th was unique, unlike any other American terrorist group before or since. May 19th was created and led by women. Women picked the targets, women did the planning, and women made and planted the bombs. They'd created a new sisterhood of the bomb and gun. To outsiders, these people must have seemed like ideological robots programmed for permanent rebellion, like ghosts visiting from the past, unfriendly reminders of the ferocious struggles that had threatened to tear the country apart in the late 1960s and early 1970s. May 19th certainly didn't see itself that way. Its members weren't automata, relics, or spooks, but agents of history willing to sacrifice everything to transform the world. May 19th members prided themselves on their psychological toughness, analytical rigor, and lack of sentimentality. They were intellectuals, but also warriors, with the purported science of Marxism-Leninism serving as their infallible guide. As Marxist-Leninists, they believed that men and women could bend the arc of history and usher in a new world free of injustice and oppression. Their vision of what this heaven on earth would look like was hazy, but one thing was certain: creating it would require nothing less than violent revolution. This vagueness about ultimate objectives is typical among terrorists. As Georgetown University's Bruce Hoffman argued, groups as varied as Al-Qaeda and the Red Army faction live in the future they are chasing after, but they have only a very vague conception of what exactly that future might entail. The Rota Army Fraction, Red Army Faction, or RAF, was a far-left terrorist group founded in West Germany in 1970. During the next 29 years, the RAF robbed banks, bombed military installations, murdered policemen and U.S. soldiers, and in 1979, attempted to assassinate NATO commander and future U.S. Secretary of State, General Alexander Haig. The group, whose first generation was labeled the Baader-Meinhof Gang, dissolved not long after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, declaring, "The revolution says, I was, I am, I will be again." May 19th had much in common with other ideological extremists. In her book, True Believer, Stalin's Last American Spy, the author Katie Martin wrote that Soviet agent Noel Field's commitment and his submission to his cause were as total and ultimately as destructive as those of today's ISIS recruits. Ideologies, whether communist, fascist, nationalist, or jihadist, can offer the promise of what Martin calls a final correction of all personal, social, and political injustices. For the captured minds of May 19th, their variant of Marxism-Leninism was a pathway to total liberation. As another of their ideological heroes, Fidel Castro said in 1961, "Dentro de la revolución todo, contra la revolución nada. Inside the revolution, everything. Against the revolution, nothing. Most of the members of the group were self-described lesbians, and they were feminists, but they weren't part of the bourgeois women's liberation scene represented by Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and the National Organization for Women. Pay equity, daycare, abortion rights, all well and good, but in May 19th's view, they were secondary to the real struggle at hand. During the 1970s, some radical feminists insisted that testosterone poisoning had saturated American life. Total separation from parasitic male mutants, as one writer put it, was the only way to escape systemic male domination, violence, and aggression. This is the year to stamp out the Y chromosome, one lesbian collective insisted in 1973. Thousands of women built penis-free enclaves in cities around the country, the Gutter Dykes in San Francisco, the Furies in Washington, D.C., and CLIT, Collective Lesbian International Terrors, in New York. The Van Dykes, a peripatetic band of motorized vegans, roamed southwestern highways in search of an imagined woman's land. Lamar Van Dyke, the group's founder, was a kind of lesbian Joseph Smith, who, like the founder of Mormonism, traveled with an entourage of wives and ex-wives and future wives in tow. In New York, the Radical Lesbians Collective, known originally as Lavender Menace, a name chosen in reaction to Betty Friedan's remark that lesbians were a lavender menace that threatened the women's liberation movement, declared, "A lesbian is the rage of all women condensed to the point of explosion." The women of May 19th couldn't have agreed more. But for them, explosion wasn't just a metaphor. They channeled their fury into violent insurrection. They took in the words of Leila Khaled, a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine and a purported Audrey Hepburn lookalike, who became a global revolutionary icon after her participation in an August 1969 airline hijacking. "We act heroically in a cowardly world to prove that the enemy is not invincible," she declared. "We act violently in order to blow the wax out of the ears of deaf Western liberals and to remove the straws that block their vision. We act as revolutionaries to inspire the masses and to trigger off the revolutionary upheaval in an era of counter-revolution." May 19th hated sexism, chauvinism, and misogyny, but its members weren't interested in the crunchy, women-only lifestyle embraced by the separatists. As one woman close to May 19th explained, "I think it was a reaction to lesbian separatism and being like, oh, if we just go back to our own land and leave men out of our lives, then everything will be fine, and we can just wear our Birkenstocks and have our women-only spaces and live our own lives." For May 19th, revolutionary politics came first. Sexual oppression, capitalism, racism, imperialism, all of that horror went together. Lesbian liberation required national liberation. Men would be allowed to join the struggle, provided they were tuned in to the correct ideological frequency. Men could be useful in all kinds of ways. One male member even donated his sperm to a female comrade who wanted to have children. But they had to know their place and be alert to and fight against any sexist or homophobic proclivities. In 1979, just after May 19th's founding, the Talking Heads released Life During Wartime. Reportedly inspired by accounts of terrorist groups such as the Red Army faction and the Symbionese Liberation Army, the song is a driving, hallucinatory first-person chronicle of a hunted, unnamed figure moving through an unspecified underground realm, heard of a van that is loaded with weapons, packed up and ready to go. May 19th lived the band's lyrics, and in real time. Terrorism is necessarily a secretive undertaking. Even minimally competent groups will do everything they can to conceal their underground activities from outsiders, understandably fearing that breaches in security will expose them to the repressive forces of the state. In their own minds, they're at war, and they work to maintain a warlike footing and focus. Ingrained habits of conspiracy tend to persist long after the armed struggle is over. Former terrorists tend to carry their deepest secrets to the grave. Defining terrorism is something of a parlor game among specialists, with nearly every expert offering his or her own variation. The definition put forth by Georgia State University's John Horgan seems as good as any. Terrorism is a strategy used to instill fear. It's a form of psychological warfare that uses violence or the threat of violence to create some social, political, or religious change. Terrorist violence, as opposed to other types of violence, is distinguishable because it serves a bigger picture. For stylistic reasons, I use terrorism and violent extremism interchangeably. Former weatherman Bill Ayers's memoir, Fugitive Days, clocked in at nearly 300 pages. Yet Ayers provided relatively few operational details about Weather's terrorist campaign, which had ended 25 years before his book was published. Any reader hoping to learn more about who was involved in Weather's scores of bombings, how the explosive devices were made, and how their attacks were planned and carried out, will almost certainly be disappointed. Unfortunately for Ayers, his publication date coincided with the attacks of September 11, 2001, which overnight essentially eliminated the possibility that a memoir by a retired terrorist would find a large sympathetic readership. As Ayers wrote at the beginning of his book, there is a necessary incompleteness here, a covering over of facts and a blurring of details which is in part an artifact of those fugitive days. Most names and places have been changed, many identities altered, and the fingerprints wiped away. What explains Ayers's guarded approach? Perhaps his time underground really was a blur, and he was unable to reconstruct events with any fidelity. Alternatively, Ayers might have been worried that being too forthright might somehow open him up, or his former comrades, to prosecution for some still unsolved weather bombings. Or perhaps he's simply maintaining the discipline of a revolutionary and the habits of conspiracy. Despite the reticence of those who've engaged in political violence, it's still possible to draw back the curtain and reveal the inner workings of a terrorist group, and to tell, at least in part, the story that former members would rather see remained buried. Trained as a historian of the Cold War, I first came across the May 19th Communist Organization while working as a terrorism researcher at the RAND Corporation, arguably the nation's preeminent defense think tank. Later at CNA, another government-funded research and analysis center, I had the opportunity to write about homegrown terrorist groups, including May 19th. The United States was in the midst of fighting what President George W. Bush had called the Global War on Terror, or GWOT, and I was interested in the roots of counterterrorism. I discovered that during the 1970s and 1980s, the United States had waged an earlier war on terror against violent domestic extremists, and it was during that period that the government created many of the counterterrorism tools and approaches that continue to be used today. During the course of my research for this book, I was fortunate to spend considerable time with retired Federal Bureau of Investigation special agents who worked on cases involving May 19th. These individuals were generous, patient, and full of considerable insights. Former members of May 19th, on the other hand, chose not to participate. Emails, letters, telephone calls, and entreaties through third parties went unanswered, with one exception. A former member, who served more than a decade in prison on terrorism-related charges, gave a terse but somewhat wry response to my interview request. "Having read your biography, what in the world makes you think I'd ever speak with you?" Why, indeed. Perhaps they feared that talking with me would reveal information that could expose them or others to prosecution, or that giving an interview would somehow fuel anti-left-wing forces at work in American society. More simply, perhaps they concluded that they had nothing to gain from participating in research for this book. Fortunately, I uncovered many other major sources of information on May 19th. The papers of group members are in the Sophia Smith collection at Smith College and at the Columbia University Medical Center archives and special collections, and include a wealth of material, such as unpublished autobiographies, diaries, and letters, and other communications. Court records were another invaluable source. For reasons that are unclear, to me at least, terrorism researchers have made scant use of legal documents, despite the amount and quality of otherwise unavailable information they can contain. At U.S. district courts in New York and Washington, and at the Federal Records Centers in Philadelphia and suburban Boston, I unearthed affidavits, sentencing memoranda, motions by the defense and prosecution, photographs and documents entered into evidence, transcripts, and even wiretap transcriptions and grand jury testimony. May 19th members put things down on paper, including surveillance notes, aliases, and operational assessments of their attacks, much, if not all of which, wound up in the hands of prosecutors and the courts. The thousands of pages of once-secret FBI and other U.S. government files released to me under the Freedom of Information Act provided information on the pursuit of May 19th, the history and development of the group, as well as the relationship between May 19th and the revolutionary firmament of the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s. Like any other records, public or private, these documents need to be treated with the proper degree of skepticism and caution. Names of living persons were redacted, as were the names of some sources and interview subjects. But when analyzed together with other sources, and with an understanding of U.S. law enforcement history, procedure, and culture, these files were invaluable. Contemporaneous press reports, including in-depth accounts of criminal episodes involving May 19th and the manifestos and other material produced by the group, helped flesh out the story. Once behind bars, May 19th members often spoke to journalists they considered sympathetic, and although these interviews are larded with political rhetoric and sloganeering, they also contain some useful nuggets of personal information. In the writing of this book, I have tried to reach the high standard set by Charles Nicholl, the author of a gripping historical and philosophical investigation into the murder of Christopher Marlowe, the enigmatic and ultimately unknowable Elizabethan playwright and spy. I have not invented anything. This story is as true as I can make it. Typically, Americans see terrorism as something alien, foreign, and rare. But violent political extremism is woven deeply into our history. Consider the ethnic cleansing of Native Americans from the 16th through the 19th centuries, the counter-revolutionary terrorism carried out by white Southerners during the era of Reconstruction, violent acts committed by or attributed to anarchists, including the bombing outside J.P. Morgan's bank in Lower Manhattan on September 16, 1920, that killed 39 people and wounded hundreds of others. The day Wall Street exploded, Yale historian Beverly Gage called it. The blast erupted from a horse-drawn wagon packed with dynamite, an early example of what would become known 9 decades later in Iraq and elsewhere as a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, or IED. Beverly Gage, The Day Wall Street Exploded, A Story of America in Its First Age of Terror, New York, Oxford University Press, 2010. And sedition and armed insurrection by white supremacists during the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, which culminated in the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City on the morning of April 19, 1995, killed 168 people, including 19 children, and injured hundreds. The U.S. government defines domestic terrorist acts as those that occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States. Homegrown terrorism has its own definitions. The journalist and counterterrorism expert Peter Bergen, in an article written just after the June 12, 2016 Orlando nightclub massacre, noted that every lethal terrorist attack in the United States in the past decade and a half has been carried out by American citizens or legal permanent residents, operating either as lone wolves or in pairs, who have no formal connections or training from foreign terrorist organizations. In other words, these attacks were by homegrown terrorists. The women of May 19th were part of a generation of violent left-wing militancy in the United States that stretched from the 1960s into the 1980s. Uncovering the history of the group can help us understand how and why a tiny band of Americans decided to wage a war against their own country. That history isn't likely to produce tidy lessons about how such terrorism can be prevented, but it can help us understand the circumstances and contexts from which homegrown domestic terror emerged, and make us better prepared to grapple with the violent political extremism that remains part of the American landscape. After all, as the Black Power militant H. Rap Brown said in 1967, violence is as American as cherry pie. Part 1. A New Sisterhood, 1978 to 1983. 1. Keepers of the Flame. Our dreams will be the shell casings that pierce the enemy, as our love and resistance continue. Susan Rosenberg, Compañera, Fall 1986. New York, 1979. There is no record of the founding of May 19th. The closest thing to a formal beginning was a fiery manifesto the nascent group issued in 1979, The Principles of Unity of the May 19th Communist Organization. Their creed was revolutionary anti-imperialism, and like other millenarians, they wrapped their faith in reason. Our science is Marxism-Leninism, they wrote. The United States, according to May 19th, was the ultimate white oppressor nation, a parasite on the Third World, a poisonous spider at the center of a noxious global web. May 19th believed that national liberation wasn't just an international challenge. The United States had its own internal colonies filled with blacks, American Indians, and Puerto Ricans, who were just as ruthlessly exploited as the denizens of any sweltering tropical dictatorship. And it wasn't just racial minorities who were subjugated. The oppression of women in general, and lesbians in particular, was another symptom of a national sickness. Imperialism, capitalism, and racism were strong, but still, May 19th saw some hopeful signs. They heard revolutionary rumblings inside the guts of the American monster and detected systemic weaknesses that were ready to be exploited. May 19th insisted that the oppressed nations within the U.S. are preparing themselves to wage a full-scale people's war against the enemy that has entered its final decline. The women offered apocalyptic visions and end-time prophecies, a much more brutal fascist regime, the liberation of captive peoples, and the destruction of the United States. How could their tiny band of middle-class intellectuals contribute to the global struggle and bend the arc of history to speed up the destruction of the parasite nation? One of their lawyers later described the women as revolutionaries, dreamers, lovers of freedom. Some are lesbians. All love women, people fighting everywhere for self-determination and dignity. But ushering in the new world required more than just good intentions and beautiful dreams. Mao Zedong had made that point back in 1927, when the Chinese Communist Party had been fighting for power. The revolution, Mao said, is not a dinner party, or writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing embroidery. It cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperate, kind, courteous, restrained, and magnanimous. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. According to May 19th's analysis, the ruling class would never give up peacefully, and May 19th, one member said later, wanted to ensure that all the shooting didn't come from one side. May 19th said that the first world mass movements of the 1960s had taken a wrong turn. Instead of doing all they could to support national liberation struggles in places such as Vietnam, South Africa, and Palestine, 60s radicals thought they were leading a global revolution. May 19th pledged to avoid that mistake. They vowed to shed their white skin privilege and work as North American anti-imperialists under the leadership of black and brown people. We, white women, say no to America where white is a badge of acceptance of daily murder, they declared. May 19th didn't immediately reach for bombs and guns. They started off with nonviolent agitation and propaganda, demonstrations, picketing, speeches, film screenings, and politically informed graphic art. May 19th had a number of affiliated groups that promoted its agenda and served as recruitment pools. The FBI, among others, sometimes referred to these as front groups. that is, nominally independent organizations with little or no apparent link to May 19th. The all-women Madam Bin Graphics Collective pumped out propaganda posters. Other affiliated groups raised funds for Robert Mugabe's wing of the Zimbabwe African National Union, a guerrilla movement fighting to end white minority rule in Rhodesia. They raised hell about imprisoned Puerto Ricans they called freedom fighters. There was an everlasting spiral of activity, urgency, and exhaustion, former May 19th member Mary Patton recalled. Two women were the heart and soul of the new formation. Although a decade apart in age, they had much in common: a solidly middle-class New York upbringing, early ideological commitment, education at elite institutions, and an unwavering dedication to revolution, new values, and sexual self-actualization. Judy and Susan, sisters in arms. Judith Alice Clark was born to Joseph and Ruth Clark in New York on November 23, 1949. She described her childhood as happy, but it was an unusual upbringing, at least in her early years. As a young man in Brooklyn, Joe had been a member of a Marxist-Leninist microsect that had followed the Bolshevik leader Leon Trotsky into anti-Stalinism. Later, Joe concluded that Trotsky and his worshippers had been all wrong. Comrade Joseph Stalin, not Trotsky, was the true communist godhead. Joe switched sides and joined the Moscow-dominated Communist Party USA. He rose quickly through the party's ranks, and before long he was a full-time, high-level party functionary and an editor of the party's newspaper, The Daily Worker. Unsurprisingly, FBI Red Hunters kept tabs on the Clarks. They had a sense they were being watched, but it didn't rattle them. They were on the right side of history, after all. Stalin's Soviet Union was their alpha and omega. They were utopians, like Tilly Olson, a true believing American poet who wrote in 1934 that the Soviet Union was a heaven brought down to earth in Russia. In 1950, Joe got to see his revolution's control center firsthand. He moved Ruth, their son Andrew, and baby Judy to Moscow, where he took up a position as a Daily Worker correspondent. The relocation represented a remarkable devotion to the communist cause, given the harsh conditions that prevailed in the Soviet capital and the anti-communist sentiment that saturated post-war America. After a 3-year stint, the Clarks returned to New York, and Joe and Ruth continued their party work. The family lived in Brooklyn, first in Bensonhurst and then in solidly lower-middle-class Flatbush. In the summer, they would often go out to Mohegan Lake in Westchester County, where there was a colony of fellow communists. The folk singer Pete Seeger, a supporter of the Communist Party, made occasional appearances at Lakeside Hootenannies. Those annual excursions to the cozy summer community reinforced social bonds among party members. Being a communist meant total commitment. But by the mid-1950s, Ruth and Joe had growing doubts about the communist cause. Even as pampered guests of the USSR, they had seen the pock-marked face of Stalinism up close. As with many other party members around the world, the bloody Soviet suppression of a nationwide uprising in Hungary in 1956 and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev's secret speech in 1957 denouncing Stalin's crimes forced the Clarks to reassess their slavish devotion to Moscow. Ruth's party-related activities dropped off, and in 1957, Joe finally checked out of the party. There were repercussions. Former comrades denounced him as a deserter and liquidationist, and it was tough for him to find work. Being a former Communist Party member, Daily Worker editor, and one-time Moscow resident was not exactly a formula for success in late 1950s America. But he managed to eke out a living at the Direct Mail Envelope Company and then at the American Cancer Society. Ruth helped support the family with odd jobs, including door-to-door interviewing for Trix cereal. Although only a pre-teenager, Judy was developing a political consciousness, and she didn't like her parents' growing anti-communism. Weaned on Marxism-Leninism, she was a classic red diaper baby who'd loved the party's warm embrace. Until I was about 8 years old, she recalled, I had lived in a home and in an extended party family that encouraged important ideals, like tolerance of diversity in the world, awareness of history, of racism, of other forms of injustice. That all got yanked away. I couldn't bear the loss of community and ideology and purposefulness in my life. According to Judy, Ruth turned rightward, trying to bring the family into the American mainstream. She was getting more and more into wanting her family to be like From Father Knows Best. But unlike the stereotypical 1950s mother, Ruth pursued a serious career. By the 1970s, she was a senior executive at Daniel Yankelevich's polling firm and the de facto inventor of the exit poll. Joe remained a man of the left, a socialist, but a staunch anti-communist and opponent of Stalinism. He was a co-founder of Dissent magazine, a lone voice of democratic socialism in mid-century America. In pungent prose, Joe attacked Stalinism, communism, and Fidel Castro, the tropical Spartacus, whose unfolding revolution in Cuba displayed a distinctive, often mad, character. Judy, however, kept the far-left faith. "I would be the keeper of the flame in my family," she recalled. By the time she was 15, she was politically active in her own right. She marched on a Congress of Racial Equality picket line outside a Woolworth's lunch counter in Queens. "I was always drawn to the most militant groups," she said. "And if the group I was in wasn't radical enough, I would push at the edge." Judy attended the academically rigorous Midwood High School in Brooklyn, then the University of Chicago, where she joined Students for a Democratic Society. Agitation was part of the on-campus zeitgeist, and in January 1969, she and hundreds of other students occupied an administration building, demanding the rehiring of a sociology professor denied tenure and insisting on a permanent student voice in the faculty hiring process. The university's president, Edward H. Levy, whose diminutive frame, low-key manner, and modest lifestyle belied a formidable persona, weighed his options. He could have followed the lead of his Columbia University counterpart, Grayson Kirk, who had faced a similar challenge the year before. Kirk had called in the police, who'd kicked out the protesters and restored a semblance of order. But Levy was a shrewder character than Kirk. Cops meant cracked skulls, bad press, and more anguish for his beloved university. Levy decided to wait it out, and sure enough, after 2 weeks, the militants vowed to leave the building. After the demonstration, the University Disciplinary Committee voted to expel 42 protesters, including Judy. Though she and her father had bitter ideological differences, 30 years later she wrote that he had subjected her to his fits of fury and political harangues, Joe was a loving man who wanted to help his only daughter. He asked Irving Howe, Dissent's co-editor, to reach out to the novelist Saul Bellow, who had deep Chicago ties. Bellow intervened with Levy, asking him to please give the Clark girl a second chance. "No, she's a bad one," the university president said. Judy was out. No matter. By now, she was a self-described revolutionary. "I felt that my parents had kind of failed. And so, if they failed, I had to do something different," Judy said in an interview in 2017. "I romanticized the revolutions going on around the world, and I sort of felt like I had to show I could do whatever was necessary, including violence." As the Students for a Democratic Society self-destructed, Judy became part of what would become known as the Weather Underground. She lived in a collective of a dozen or so radicals, mostly women but led by men, and she was an enthusiastic part of violent Weather Street actions, including the notorious Days of Rage rampage on the streets of Chicago in 1969. On March 17, 1970, the feds issued a warrant for her arrest. The charge: interstate flight to avoid prosecution for mob action. According to the FBI wanted poster that soon was hanging in post offices around the country, Judy was 5 feet 3 inches tall, with brown hair and brown eyes and a medium build. And she had sparkling eyes, according to one fellow activist's poetic tribute. Judy was on the run until December. Bureau men eventually nabbed her in New York at an Upper East Side movie house, where she was watching Yellow Submarine. She served 9 months in the Cook County Jail, and after her release, she moved back in with her parents in Brooklyn. Judy was eager to return to activism. She joined the Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, or WITCH, a loosely connected feminist network founded in 1968 by the writer Robin Morgan and future Weather Underground member Naomi Jaffe. According to which, men as such weren't the enemy. The true evil was late capitalism, corporations, consumerism, and commodification, explained in a 1968 manifesto. Witch is a total concept, a new dimension of women. It means breaking the bond of woman as a biologically and sexually defined creature. It implies the destruction of passivity, consumerism, and commodity fetishism. Who is the enemy? Witches must name names, or rather we must name trademarks and brand names. Witch loved to put on a good spectacle. One Halloween, 13 women dressed as witches went to Lower Manhattan to hex the temple of modern capital, the New York Stock Exchange. Witch also conducted what it called invisible actions, such as the ex post facto snuffing out of Lurleen Wallace, the wife of Alabama Governor George Wallace, who had succumbed to breast cancer in May 1968. During the mid-1970s, Judy edited Midnight Special, a publication for convicts sponsored by the far-left National Lawyers Guild. Her readers included Congressman Larry McDonald, a leader of the ultra-right John Birch Society, known for his fanciful conspiracy-mongering, his rapid commitment to fighting communism and subversion, and for his tenuous hold on reality. But the Georgia congressman stumbled upon the truth when he said in 1982 that Midnight Special served as an inter-prison communications service by publishing messages from militant inmates and providing inflammatory accounts of prison strikes and disturbances. By the late 1970s, Judy had earned just about every radical credential. But the path of radicalism that lay ahead of her was likely beyond anything she imagined. Susan Lisa Rosenberg was born in New York on October 5, 1955, the only child of Bella and Emmanuel. Bella was a theatrical producer, and Manny a kindly dentist who treated indigent patients at his clinic in Spanish Harlem. Mr. and Mrs. Rosenberg were classic New York liberals. "We were always liberal, always into causes, taking part in civil rights demonstrations and anti-war marches," Manny recalled. "Susan asked to go with me even though she was only 11 or 12 at the time. I never pressured her." Susan's parents sent her to the private but progressive Walden School, not far from their Upper West Side apartment. Students were on a first-name basis with their teachers, no grades were handed out, and the school stressed personal expression over competition. Susan was politically precocious and moving steadily to the left. In an 11th grade essay, she expressed a proto-Marxist notion when she wrote that capitalist production does not begin or end with people's needs. It begins and ends with money. By age 14, she was a member of the high school student union, the youth branch of Students for a Democratic Society. She was tear-gassed at an anti-war demonstration, and she started hanging out with the Black Panthers and their Puerto Rican analog, the Young Lords. Susan was part of a political demographic, summarized by one neoconservative scold as liberal parents, radical children. Susan was an excellent student. Before her senior year, she was admitted to Barnard, entering in 1972. Her academic career flourished. In the back of a blue book, her English professor scribbled, "Very funny and perceptive exam." She got involved in the burgeoning women's liberation movement. A legendary professor of American history, James Shenton, ignited her interest in abolitionism and in the life of John Brown, the fiery white insurrectionist who believed that the evil of slavery could be ended only through armed rebellion. She also found inspiration in the revolutionary women of Vietnam. "I saw the women of Vietnam rise up as part of their nation to say, 'We're going to have our own destiny,'" she said in 1989. "I had never seen anything like that, and I wanted to be like that." Susan switched, though, from the well-heeled Barnard to the grittier City College of New York. Slender and with magnetic green eyes, as an interviewer later noted, Susan now coiffed her hair in an eye-popping, foot-high afro. In the mid-1970s, she doubled down on the revolution. She went to Cuba in 1976 as part of the Venceremos Brigade, an organization founded in 1969 by New Left Fidelistas in solidarity with the Castro Revolution. Like other youthful leftists, Susan idealized Cuba and the bearded ex-guerrillas who were building socialism on the island. Venceremos participants cut sugarcane, smoked as many Havana cigars as they liked, and fraternized with Partido Comunista de Cuba dignitaries. If the North American pilgrims got lucky, Castro himself, the all-powerful Líder Máximo, might mingle and yuck it up with the visiting gringos. Venceremos veterans typically returned from their island excursion even more dewy-eyed about Cuba's Marxist-Leninist experiment.
Katherine, Massey Book Club. Alrighty, we will resume. There's a break in the text. We're still in chapter 1, so the break where we will resume. If you have the physical book, it'll be ... After she returned from Cuba, Susan found work as a drug counselor. That's where we'll pick up at. If you have the physical copy of the book, if not, just you can remember that sentence. That's where we'll start for part 2. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. I will be John Brown. Although it's not that, strange, surprising that John Brown would be mentioned in a book like this. Probably many times in a book like this. One thing I will say quickly, and then we'll get to folks, they have commentary, get to emails, all that good stuff. The zeitgeist, not listener input, is how I select books for the Katherine Massey Book Club, and that is a big part of how we picked or are reading this book right now. The zeitgeist of what's kind of happening and influencing my counter-racist thoughts, things that are happening on the plantation and in the known universe at this exact moment. Now, I was having some difficulty for many reasons making a choice to be definitive. Pick this book. After I picked this book, we start reading today. They mention H. Rap Brown. He was mentioned in the last book that we read, Evelyn Williams, Inadmissible Evidence, back-to-back books. And I mentioned then, I said, oh man, he had a name change. It is Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin. But Mr. Al-Amin passed away this week at the age of 82, died in a Georgia prison. This is from the New York Times. It was published on November 23. Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, known as H. Rap Brown, defined black militancy, whatever that means, in the 1960s with a call to arms against white oppression, and who later lived quietly as a Muslim clerk and shopkeeper until his arrest in 2000 in the murder of a sheriff's deputy, died on Sunday in a federal prison hospital in North Carolina. He was 82. His death at the Federal Medical Center, Butner, was confirmed by Christy Brashears, the Director of Communications for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which operates the hospital. She did not specify a cause. In February, the Washington Informer reported that Mr. Al-Amin had multiple myeloma and that his health was deteriorating. He had been serving a life sentence without parole. He goes on to give more details about his lifetime in the Black Panther Party and all that. Incidentally, he said he was innocent about this sheriff's shooting about, I guess, 25 years ago. Debated. They have lots of those, cases. Blackberry. They might, now that he's deceased, they might even come out with evidence that he actually didn't do this. But Mr. Al-Amin passed away this week at the age of 82. I'll say because he changed his name like a while ago, and I felt some type of way with Mr. William Rosenau, the author of Tonight We Bombed the U.S. Capitol, suspected racist. You got access to all this information and documents, and you are a very informed, intelligent white man, expert. All this access to powerful white people. Certainly he changed his name decades ago. White people, they don't go around talking about Bruce Jenner. No, we're not even talking about it. Lesbian, LGBTQ and all that, call people what they want to be called. He changed his name decades ago. Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin. That's the first thing they got in the New York Times article, not H. Rap Brown. Deliberate. They don't call it Toby. They don't call you correct name. Anyway, the number to dial, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I will say I was a little, what shall I say? I had a slight moment of anxiety. I was reading, following along with the book, right, as I normally do. And there were big chunks, I thought, where the text and the audio didn't match. And I was like, uh-oh, they're reading stuff that's not in the written text. Like, what is going on here? Now, it would be like a big chunk, but then it would come back and it would be exactly verbatim in line with the text. It's like, what is going, man, I'm gonna have to be, real sharp here because this is crazy. Like, what? And I double checked, make sure it's unabridged because, I hate that reading an audio book that has, they didn't edit it and took stuff out and all that. So it's unabridged, not supposed to be anything missing. This book is going to be one of the few times where we read an audio book. This is not AI. This is an actual person. They include the end notes. So not the footnotes of the text, but there are certain end notes for chapters, and they include that within the audio book, which is great. So we get some of the extra information. But it was throwing me off a little bit, just how that information is included. Neither here nor there. The email, untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. I don't know why I was reluctant to choose this book. It's not even that long. Like, it's one of those, even if it was really uninteresting and boring, which at least for me so far, that is not the case. John Brown, not racist white people, what? But even if it was, this book is not very long. So it's about the same length as Evelyn Williams' book, maybe even shorter. So we won't be reading it too long. But they mentioned this M19 group and all these white lesbians, not all white people's is racist Antifas, and they are talking about their solidarity with the Negras of the 1970s. They got a newsletter from 1973. This is May 19th. Got their little communist publication, and it's got a picture of a big crowd. I mean, it's probably, I'm not an expert crowd counter, but my best Negro estimate would be you got at least 50. Probably more than that because I can't see, the full crowd. But just from what I'm judging here, I would say you got at least 50 to 60 people. Could easily be more than that depending on, how far the crowd goes back and such. But at least 50 to 60 looks like white women. Doesn't look like they got no racially ambiguous folks, white women. And it says they got signs up that say self-determination for the black nation. Fight white supremacy. Stop killer cops. All you need is hands up, don't shoot George Floyd. That's all you need. And they're like, oh, I've seen you guys before. Is this in Portland? That's what I'd be thinking. Not all white people's is racist. Is that you, Jane Elliott? What's going on here? Anyway, but they say, I'll read, this is the last paragraph. It's like a 4-page brochure or publication, but it says, we support Assata Shakur and the Black Liberation Army. The Black Liberation Army changes the terms of war in America. And I think this is so funny. These white people spell America with a K. Oh, I crack. I don't even do that. Now that I see these white people do it, I'm never going to do that. But America K, by waging that war today. In doing so, they have smashed the invincibility of the U.S. imperialist date and are beginning to break the chains of colonialism. Nothing makes that clearer than the liberation of Assata Shakur from prison on November 2, 1979 by the fighting forces of the Black liberation struggle. The military and the political triumph struck a qualitative blow against America. America's war apparatus, and proved decisively that the Black Liberation Army was not dead or all imprisoned, but was alive and fighting today. It is the fight waged by the BLA that proves that the Black liberation struggle must follow the laws of revolutionary struggles, just like every other national liberation struggle in the world today, and that in applying the strategy of people's war to the war in America, they will win. And all of us who unite with that strategy and dare to struggle will join in the victory. John Brown, live like him. Dare to struggle. Dare to win. And they go wild. And then they say rhetoric. They do some sloganeering, don't they? What struggle? We gonna struggle and revolutionary struggle and the struggle and the struggle and the struggle. You see, we got these signs like a George Floyd. Oh, we got okay. We waiting for your brother George Floyd. We gonna have T-shirts and everything, hashtags. We got it all. They probably had hashtags back then too. Anyway, you can download this if you're so interested. It is linked. Well, I guess if you have the ebook, it's linked, so you can just get the PDF. If you have the hard copy, maybe you put this in like the back of the book or something. But it is fascinating to see pictures, and woo, it could be Portland circa 2000. What was all that? 2020 when they were rolling around in the streets in Portland and such. Any hoodles might be doing that now about ICE, maybe Antifa. Let's see, *61 folks have commentary to share. Is this, and like I said, one of the reasons I wanted to read this, hey, not all white peoples is racist, right? Any of these folks here sound like they are not racist, and or does this seem like, if such a thing does exist, white people who are not racist, do any of these folks seem like, hey, this fits the bill? If such a thing exists, a non-racist white person, this seems like how they should function. Let us know, and that's something we'll kind of keep in mind and return to as we are reading this book, right? Not all white peoples is racist. Let's see. I'll read one email, then see if folks have commentary. I will try and do better. I think the second to last session on Assata Shakur, I somehow was missing hands on the switchboard and didn't get them until we were almost ready to sign out of the program. So hopefully I will do way better. Don't wait till the last minute, but *61 if folks have thoughts, commentary on the first portion, I'll get to email number 1. Let's see. Got moved off my tab. Give me one. Oh, okay. There we go. All right. Email number 1. Greetings, Gus listeners and callers interested to learn more about these suspected racists. I did not pay much attention to them when they were active. Well, I didn't really know about these folks until pretty recently. Never even heard of them. Intro. 1. 1981, President Ronald Reagan, Morning in America. Lower taxes, shrink the federal government, flex the military muscle. Eerily similar to Trump 2.0, Make America Great Again, Doge invade Venezuela. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. In fact, that seems like a regular bit of political rhetoric from people classified as white. Often people that are classified as white and associated with what they call Republicans, that, hey, we have to shrink the government. We got too much government overreach, that sort of thing. Government is too big. Like they're talking about that all the time. Frequently that'll be linked with taxes, and maybe even the government is doing too much to meddle in our Negro affairs, that type of thing. Well, all long history, really all the way back to slavery. Let's see. 2. Jeffrey Toobin, say it ain't so old. Jeff Toobin in the book club. One more again. Rest in power. Orenthal James Simpson. I said the same thing. Like to see him quoted so early. Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And I don't even think Jeff, he, in this book, Rosenau said, hey, this is nonfiction. I went out and researched and made my Freedom of Information requests, all the rest of it. This is factual, evidence-based writing. Jeff Toobin, man, he will leave information out and evidence and all that and try and trick you to OJ. Oh, yeah, Orenthal James did that thing. Shout to Mark Furman. 3. Bill Ayers, millionaire professor married to suspected racist revolutionary Bernardine Doors and Cow's guest. 2009, June 2009. Yes, sir, guest on the program. And I even have to add, we had Jeffrey Haas, white man suspected racist, as a guest on the program in the summer, June no less, of 2023. Now, we talked about COINTELPRO, Chicago. They were brought up today. We talked about Fred Hampton and the FBI, local Chicago police working together in the assassination of Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, and their, in general, COINTELPRO activities against the Black Panther Party in Chicago, Illinois in general. Lots of great information in his book. But we specifically talked about Bill Ayers, and I believe Jeffrey Haas, he's a white man. I think he either knows Bill Ayers, or they met, or what have you, or at least he, I think Bill Ayers is a cool white man. Okay, Bill Ayers is Weather Underground and wrote all of these books and such, did all these bombings. Now he's a distinguished professor at the University of Illinois. But we got into it, Jeffrey Haas and I, because I said Bill Ayers is a terrorist. And he said, whoa. You watch your tongue, Gus T. Don't you call no Bill Ayers no terrorist. He is not no terrorist. Matter of fact, not all white peoples is racist, you old heathen. Bill Ayers was trying to liberate your no-count Negro hind parts. I said, whoa. Wasn't Bill Ayers, weren't they going around bombing buildings? Yeah, he bombed the building. They didn't kill nobody. I said, I didn't say. Matter of fact, pause. Didn't some of these bombs, they blew up some of their own members? We didn't get to them. But he took exception to that, me saying Bill Ayers is a terrorist. I said, wasn't this dude like on the FBI's most wanted list? They blowing up federal property? What the hell? What else do you call that? Bill Ayers, you a freedom fighter. Get out of here. But if that was Leroy, if that had been Assata, Assata Shakur, that H-Rap Brown, that was his name, you pick the Negro. We wouldn't be having no conversation. H-Rap Brown did what? He blew up what? Black identity, extremist, terrorist, and Al-Qaeda? Lord. Come on, man. But in fact, I'm probably going to play that for the intro next week. I can't even, we spent like time. That wasn't even something that I had like in my notes or anything to like ask him about when he was a guest on the program, Mr. Haas. We were supposed to be talking about Fred Hampton, sodomizing black males, terrorizing black people, how they got William O'Neill to cooperate, help them kill all these black people, including Mark Clark. That's the bulk of what we did talk about, COINTELPRO. But he got, you don't call no white man no terrorist. That's what William Rosenau. Quick. No hesitation, ain't even nothing to think about. What else do you call Bill Ayers? Distinguished professor, University of Illinois. I guess that's what you can call him. Let's see. Lost my place because I had to go get Jeffrey Haas's tab. Back to number 2 in Bill Ayers. Ayers, his life turned out quite different than Assata's. Facts. That's what I said when Bill Ayers was a guest on the program. And I suspect most of the so-called black militant revolutionaries. Facts. That's what we talked about when Bill Ayers was a guest on. I should maybe play both of those because we did talk about some of that with Ayers too. President Obama got a lot of criticism for having association with him. In fact, Bill Ayers, another act of tacky racism, they got video of him bragging and saying, Obama didn't write that book, Dreams from My Father. I wrote that book. He got all that from me. Like, are you serious, white man? Are you serious? And this is not all white people's is racist. 4. Smash monogamy campaign. My impression is that the Black Panther male members did not engage in such overt misogyny, but I could be wrong. I think one, it's so important to remember. I mean, now we just said we got Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, Black Panther chapter in Illinois. You got Assata Shakur, Panther 21, that's in New York. Assata, she's in New Jersey, Black Panther Party. And then, of course, you got the foundation out in Oakland, Bobby Seale, Huey P. Newton. So if you've got chapters spread out all across the continent, this part of the world, obviously it's going to vary greatly depending on where you are. And many people have talked about that, like your experience, you know, in terms of the Black Panther Party could vary greatly depending on where were you a member and then at what time did you join. So I am sure there were tons of privileged black males who didn't care nothing about no black females and all that. In fact, there are whole books that have been written about this experience. I think Angela Davis, she said she left because she felt that there was sexism in the Panthers. She's on the West Coast, obviously. I've heard others, including Mumia, say that the Panthers were female-dominated. So that, at least to some degree, would tend to push back. I mean, how would they allow so many females in a group started by 2 black dudes? How would so many females be allowed to come in and take over and in leadership positions? Anyway, you can go. There are lots of books that have been written about this and even documentaries where you can hear and see people talk about all this and addressing and how they addressed so-called sexism within the group. Lots of information has been written about that and said about that over the years. Let's see. The 5, May 19th, Malcolm X, Ho Chi Minh. Interesting that they did not name the organization after women. I said when Evelyn Williams told us about that last week, I thought, like, what in the world? That, to me, it just seemed kind of tacky. Now, I know these are dominant characters of that time period, Minister Malcolm X and the Vietnam War and white people wanting to draft dodge old slick Willie Clinton and all the rest of it. But, like, like you all name everything else after white people. Or why not put the focus of it on the, you know, replacing racism with justice component? That would be even better. But I mean, yeah, I'm not a whole group of suspected racists and white lesbians and all the rest of it. And we're going to pick some non-white people that they're like, come on. That, to me, that's just more white people. Sue Africa, man. Sue Africa. I hope to God she's in this book, man. 6. Most self-described lesbians. I think Fuller opined that anti-sexual behavior is used as a tool to promote confusion among non-white victims by racist white supremacists. I would just point back to the time period when all this is happening. We had guests on the program. I'm even thinking Katherine Fozol. We discussed the biography. I think that's her name. I'll get it correct. But Katherine Fozol, we talked about this white woman. She's studying white feminism from that era and some of these white people who say that they are not racist and work with Dr. King and all this. And then they also participated in all of this feminism, sexism, and saying that they really want to bring that to the forefront. And we got to deal with sexism and lesbianism and LGBTQ and really going extreme with that. And she has a passage in her book where she said that this is at the exact same time period, 1960s, 1970s, that there's an intense focus on replacing white supremacy with justice. And it might even be said that this is a distraction from that main goal of replacing white supremacy with justice. And I highlighted, underlined, might be deliberate. Let's get everybody distracted. Let's get on, the sexual revolution and, let's gay rights and let's get into all this anti-sexual behavior and all this other, and drugs, big part of that too. See, they didn't mention that, but all that to get you confused and thinking about anything other than being focused. Replace white supremacy with justice. That is the only thing that we're focused on. That is the problem, not let's see how much sex we can get. I want to try being a female tomorrow. Come on. Replace white supremacy with justice. Let's see. 7. H-Rap Brown violence is as American as cherry pie. Rest in power, as I said, and Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin. Indeed. Indeed. Chapter 1, again, we didn't, get that far. 1. Shows her white skin privilege a common trope of suspected racists, exceedingly rare for these types to admit practicing racism, white supremacy. I thought that portion, I highlighted that as well. I thought that also was significant. And we have had authors on the program, white man, Jim Grimsley. He was a guest on the program from North Carolina in 2016. He has a whole book. That's the title of it, How I Shed My Skin, or Shedding My Skin. I might be off by like a word or two, but I think that's what it is, How I Shed My Skin. But this is a white man talking about the same thing. I ain't racist no man. I think he might be gay. Same type of, thing. If that means anything to you all. But at the end of the day, he's supposed to, hey, I ain't racist no more. I ain't even white no more. See, I'm like the skin, I shed all that. Come on. 2. Folk singer Pete Seeger, he sang on the stage at President Obama's first inauguration. I was watching that. That was a really long affair. I was thinking, I was watching that. Did I see Pete Seeger? Maybe I did. It's so long ago. 3. Joe checked out of the Communist Party. Tough to find work. His troubles do not compare to that of Paul Robeson. See the Cows Book Club. Artist as Revolutionary by the great Dr. Gerald Horne. Yes, I think that was 220. Read that? 2020. Seems Rona-ish. Artist as Revolutionary, but I might be off. 4. Judy, University of Chicago. Occupy Adams Building, again similar to the college demonstrations regarding Palestinians today. Non-white victims should probably not participate for a variety of reasons. Facts. For example, assume all these groups are infiltrated by enforcement officials. Facts. That would be true 1968, 2028. Oh my God. And with that one specifically, man, now you want to talk about nepotism and cronyism. Lame Judy, you go be a hooligan and I'm going to go break in the building and act a fool and all that. I can't just go and study and get on the dean's list to figure out how, a smart way to help some black people in Chicago go be more Dr. Wells. Nah. And then when she gets booted out of school, her dad been strict and he a disciplinarian, but hey, this is my white child, got to look out for her. I'm going to go get some of my white cronies and we're going to go pressure the university. Don't you kick my daughter out, you let her stay. Man, how many Leroys and Jamals in Chicago or wherever else, they're in kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, and they about to get kicked out, expelled, suspended for 15 days for whatever. How many of them can go and get their powerful, influential homies? Hey, go up there and talk to the superintendent. You can't let them put Jamal up. Go up there and put a word in for Jamal. Now, how many black people got that sort of hookup resource? Come on. And since this happened with Judy, I'm sure this is not the first time. I'm sure this sort of thing happens all kinds of ways where Judy didn't get accepted. Hey, go put a word in for, or maybe even in advance to make sure her application gets pushed over the top, as they say. Come on, then come back, got the nerve to come back and talk about it. Hey, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's about meritocracy. Come on. 5. Susan Rosenberg, expressed a proto-Marxist notion. Reminds me of the great Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's story about when she came back to Chicago, the great, to visit her family and started espousing about Marxism. I think she said specifically, I'm a Marxist-Leninist, just what they said. I'm a Marxist-Leninist. To her elders, I recall they were not very receptive. She talked about that story all the time. She said, oh my Lord, my grandparents, they said, man, the more education they get, the dumber they get. Lord Jesus, this victim of rape. We're in Chicago, and so she says she a Marxist. I don't even, can you spell it? What does that even mean on the planet? You are classified as black, and you are what now? What? and Angela Davis said the same thing. No disrespect, just saying. Wow, we talked about that before. It's so similar between Dr. Welsing and Angela Davis. I think she went to Germany to study too, and they both had the afro and really similar trajectory, except Dr. Welsing hopped off on another. Replace white supremacy with justice. Facts. Let's see. 6. Ignited her interest in abolitionist John Brown. Listening to the cows has caused me to have a major side eye when Brown is mentioned by a suspected racist. Tell me about it. I didn't feel that way before, but oh man. And even the thing that galls me more, like, hey man, hey. John Brown has been dead for almost 200 years. This is generally the most cited, but not all white peoples is racist. John Brown is the most frequently cited individual white person that is that you know goodness well. Not every white person is a racist, but you'll count a racist credentials up against the great John Brown, and you ain't done nothing. Gus, shut up and sit down. John Brown has been dead almost 200 years. 1, we ain't solved this problem. Pitiful. 2, y'all ain't got nobody better. Ain't nobody raised the bar, as they say. Mike Jordan come along, great. He been retired 20 years. They say LeBron James going to raise the standard. Kobe Bryant raised the standard. Steph Curry raised the standard. Ain't nobody raised the counter-racist standard for the white team in 200 years? You have further let me know what it means to be classified as white. Jane Elliott, don't come close. Sorry. Robin DiAngelo either. White for... much obliged. Until Justice. The rest of it we didn't get to yet. untiljustice@gmail.com. Other folks, if they have emails, the number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see, I'll get some of my notes. Keep an eye out, see if folks have thoughts on the first section. As I said, as we're reading, not all white people are racist. So if that's true, is this how one would think, logically based on evidence, is this how one would think if there's such a thing as a not racist white person? Is this how they would function? Maybe we need to read a little bit more and see how all this evolved in the book, but kind of be thinking of that. And do any of the folks that we're reading, because we got a bunch of them, right? Males and females. Do any of these folks strike you as, hey, I think Judy is for real. She put her education, on the line and put her life on the line. Some of these folks went to prison, for decades and such. Like, yeah, I think Sylvia, that white sister is, she might be all right. Please let us know. If you can, even archives or what have you, if you listen after the fact, email right untiljustice@gmail.com and let us know if that is, something you conclude based on what you hear or read in the text. Let's see. Some of the things that I highlighted, the quote that starts off the book, El sueño de la razón produce monstruos, and Espanol the translation. I thought I had it, but the dream of reason produces monsters. One to think about. The dream of reason produces monsters. Fuller says system of white supremacy, that's what it turns the victims into. Monsters and monstrosities. Let's see. This, I was a little confused because this book is advertised as a group of female terrorists. That's what they say. America's first female terrorist group. But I said, man, the list, when they give the list of the May 19th organization, the first two names on the list are dudes. Now, unless they got some LGBTQ, whatever, but it's two dudes on here. So it was not an exclusively female group. Maybe it was, majority female, but you do have some white dudes in here, unless they say they're intersex or transgender or whatever, but it looks like there are some guys in here too. Let's see. From the prologue, when they talk about this initial bombing at the U.S. National War College, and they say that this intentionally ordinary couple in the system of white supremacy, ordinary is white. Probably if it had been any iteration of a black couple or two black people, period, probably would have warranted. They would not have been ordinary. Let's see. White women are dangerous. That's how they used the white woman to smuggle the bomb in her purse. That probably would still work today. The Armed Resistance Unit. What a subgroup name. Let's see. They were fighting. This is that they were committed to fighting U.S.-backed war, fascism, and genocide. Now, it doesn't say that they were committed to fighting racism. Let's see. And then it said they decided on the gigantic domed structure that dominates the D.C. landscape, an off-white symbol of imperialism, and a building erected by slave laborers whose descendants live nearby in third world squalor. I said, dang, is he talking about Fuller and Welsing, folks who live in D.C. and then got racially dislocated out of their properties? And says, that's, dang. But also, with that, Fuller got in the word guide, do not use that term off-white. He said that's another product of the system of white supremacy. Either it's white or it's not. What do you mean off-white? How off-white? I didn't even know that. The U.S. Capitol building, that's considered off-white? Why don't they just make it white? Let's see. From the introduction, I said the same thing. They said Ronald Reagan talking about shrinking the size of the federal government. Like, you don't need no more my sick white brother Elon Musk. We don't need no more Doge. Ronnie Reagan. The white people just resurrect that idea all the time. These terrorists were referred to as extremists. I thought that was a very 2020 term. I don't recall, like when the cows started, I don't recall it being as common to just, as opposed to racist, extremist. I think that's very much 21st century phrasing. Let's see. He said when the drugs is mentioned, this right in the intro, they said that this group of white people, they were part of a so-called generation of 1968, a worldwide cohort that embraced drugs, sex, rock music, and revolutionary politics with equal enthusiasm. I don't know what revolutionary politics, I don't know what that means, but the drugs and all that, man, this here is Jonestown time of year. This time, 1978, they were getting ready to break Assata Shakur out in 1979, but in 1978 this time, what was in the newspaper? Jonestown, and all them drugs that they had, and how did they get all this stuff through customs, and isn't all this stuff supposed to be recorded and logged, and how did they get transported out of the U.S. without it being cataloged? Whoa, they done broke all kinds of rules and laws, and Was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? But there were lots of those drug experiments going on at the time. That was also at the newspaper, the CIA having drug experiments that they're conducting. California, other parts of the U.S. against U.S. citizens. Let's see what happens when they get exposed to LSD. And we just sit around and watch. That was in the newspaper on a regular basis, this being reported. So, yes, you did have people embracing drugs. Get them distracted from producing justice. Let's see. I don't know what the American counterculture is. That's what Jeff Toobin's contribution was. I have no idea what that means. We have to see if Toobin gets any more quotes in this book. It says women who appeared overly devoted to their babies were reprimanded for a purported lack of revolutionary commitment, and in some cases children were taken from their mothers and given to other members of the group so they could refocus their energies on the cause. I said, woo, where have I heard that before? Jonestown. That's exactly what Father said. Remember that we don't even call anybody else father and mother except Jim and Marcella Jones. And we take your child from you, give them to somebody else, so all of your energies can be devoted towards the cause and being a good socialist. Antifa, I guess, or whatever for Jim Jones. Let's see. In 1978, that's the year of Jonestown, some of the militants created a new organization to wage a war against imperialism, racism, fascism, all one and the same. They derived the group's name from the birthday shared by the two ideological idols, Malcolm X and Ho Chi Minh. Why isn't it named after John Brown? I'm just asking. Let's see. Marxist-Leninism, that's what I said. They were intellectuals, but also writers with the purported science of Marxism-Leninism, serving as their infallible guide as Marxist-Leninists, just like Dr. Welsing, Dr. Angela Davis. I think there's some other prominent black people that we've read who identify, use the same verbiage where they're, I'm a Marxist-Leninist. I'm a Marxist-Leninist. VGQ. Let's see. Most of the members of the group were self-described lesbians, and they were feminists. White feminists, white lesbian feminists. Triple whammy. But they weren't part of the bourgeois women's liberation scene represented by Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem. Unless I've been misinformed, she's a suspected member, also CIA, and a part of the distraction campaign. And as opposed to replacing white supremacy with justice, let's get over here and burn some bras and, talk about these no-count, destroying the Y chromosome. We're going to erect some villages and towns with no dudes. Man, when they said we're going to get rid of systemic male domination, violence, and aggression, one more time. Leroy, Jamal, Jesse Jackson, H. Rap Brown, Gus T. Renegade, we black privileged males are not members, beneficiaries, participants in no system of male domination. And do you see how nefarious that idea is? That's been dragged into the 2000s, where we've had non-white guests come on this very program saying the same thing. And I have to say, saying that, hey man, you don't have the gall, the decency to insert systemic white male domination, which humbly I submit that's not what we have, but I mean at minimum. Gosh darn well Tamir Rice ain't out there in no male supremacy. Get out of here. George Floyd ain't no male supremacist. Get out of here. Gus T ain't no male supremacist. Get out of here. You can't even say Diddy. Come on. We can't even get a black doctor or a black teacher. Come on. System of male, and then they're going to say because we got to crush the Y chromosome. Thousands of women built penis-free enclaves in cities around the country, the gutter dykes in San Francisco, the Furies in Washington, D.C., and Collective Lesbian International Terrors in New York. Now, I bet you these are some racially restricted regions. Now, how many black lesbians were at CLIT? How many black lesbians were at gutter dykes in San Francisco? How many black lesbians were at the Furies in Washington, D.C.? It's a lot of black people, so how many did they have over there? Man, come on. I don't even think non-white females would have the resources and ability to erect. So we're gonna get us a whole enclave that's just for us. No privileged males allowed. Beat it. I don't even think we would have the ability to do that. And if they did, I suspect I don't know. White people might support such a thing. Does that get the whole conflict amongst? They might, but man, we can just backwards. Let's just go back the easy one with the white lesbians. They gonna let you in their collective. You go up, knock on. My white sisters, I'm lesbian, I'm with you, I got my rainbow and everything, and Leroy, Leroy that went upside my head and everything. You seen Color Purple? Let me come in and chill with y'all? Come on. And I would be remiss, all of that anti-sex for to say, so I got to give up my gender, no penises, and come hang out with white lesbians. That's justice. Let's see. We act violent. This is what the May 19th Collective, their ethos. We act violently in order to blow the wax out of the ears of deaf Western liberals, think they're talking about white people, and to remove the straws that block their vision. Now, there are a lot of metaphors, but these are the same tacky metaphors that are used now that suggest people that are classified as white have blinders, or they don't see, or they are ignorant about white supremacy racism. All of that is false. White people are dedicated to practicing white supremacy racism. They do not have straw. I have never seen anybody with straws over their eyes. I live in an area where they got bans on plastic straws, so maybe I'm not even accustomed to seeing straws like the rest of you all too frequently, but I don't see nobody with straws over their eyes and wax built up in their ears. Like, no, we have pretty reasonable hygiene around these parts, so no. White people are very cognizant and aware of white supremacy racism. Let's see. We got a definition for terrorism, which I loved. Terrorism is a strategy used to instill fear. Just with that as a first sentence right there, for sure, the master terrorists, and they brag about it. We'll bomb you. We'll burn a cross on you, Lord. Whatever. We got all kinds of ways. Ooh, you better do. We'll fire you. We'll throw you out. We'll tase you. Urgh. They got all kinds of ways of threatening you. You know what's going to happen if you keep... Matter of fact, and you know they're the master terrorists. Nobody's afraid of the privileged black male. Nobody's afraid of talking bad about Diddy. Nobody's afraid of saying a harsh word about Bill Cosby. You pick the privileged black male. Nobody's afraid of saying a harsh word about Madiba, even now that he's passed. Think you'll be stoned if you curse him or say he was a sellout? No way, even in Johannesburg. White people, on the other hand, boy, if I got just a nickel for every time I tried to bring up racism, white supremacy, and I actually was going to say not fascists, not imperialists, not colonialists, but I was just going to say, white people. Shh. The hell is wrong with you? Shh. Slow your voice. If I just got a nickel for every time I had that happen, I might have some black male privilege. I'm going to tell you, that is the result of terrorism. You get people, I've been subject to psychological warfare. I've been threatened with violence. They mentioned the Klan, counter-terrorism after the Civil War and all that. I've been threatened with violence. Make sure I don't say too much. Shh. Make sure I behave. Don't upset these white people. Shh. Don't even say white people. Shh. That is victims of terrorism. Master terrorists are the racist white supremacists. Let's see. Anything else to get in? I appreciated this commentary about Bill Ayers still being very reluctant to reveal details about their bombings and all that they did. Now, I guess that could be true. There could be charges lingering. There's no statute of limitations on murder. I don't know if they killed anyone or might have charges or something. You know, he might be defending, or even if it's not him personally, if it's some of the other people that he knew, his comrades and such. So that's the same thing I said about Assata. They didn't go into a whole lot of detail about that prison break. Might be, you know, concerned about other charges and that sort of thing. So that might be something to be mum about. Now, Rosenau seemed to think that Bill Ayers, this might be just, hey, this is the way that they function the whole time. Maybe he's got personal reasons for doing all of this. Maybe this is even a part of embellishing the story about how cool we were. Who knows? Either way, terrorist, that's the most important thing. Criminal. It wouldn't be any need to hide all this if you were not engaged in criminal activity. Terrorism. Let's see. I am so curious to get more information about the RAND Corporation and CNA, where our author worked and learned, got more of his skills as a journalist and white reporter, investigator. Let's see, where did they get funding? The RAND Corporation, where did they get their funding from? Let's see. It said many of the tools that were developed with regards to counterterrorism in the 1970s and 80s. So this would be techniques used against Black Liberation Army, maybe even techniques involving Jonestown. Because that's the same time period, 70s, 80s. Black Liberation Army, Assata Shakur, they said many of the techniques that they developed during this time period, white people, they continue to use today. That is fascinating. That's one I would have liked more details, like tactics like what? Which one specifically? Here, domestically? Internationally? Everywhere? Wow. White people refine how they control their niggers. Let's see. Last one I'll get in. I seriously doubt that 1920 bombing at Wall Street was black people, but I'd never heard of that either, so I don't know. Let's see. They say May 19th said they are against the United States as a white oppressor nation, whatever that means. And they say that it wasn't just racial minorities who were subjugated. Oh, no, of course not. We can't just do that. We got to add in. Seriously. They say the oppression of women in general and lesbians in particular was another symptom of a national sickness. What? Who is oppressing white lesbians? You get beat down, you go outside at night, you got to be in fear. John Q. Laws got a nigger knocker. I don't know, that would be what, a queer knocker? I'll crack your queer skull, you coming up. Really? Really? I don't know. They find out you're queer white women, you're going to be expelled from the University of Chicago. I don't believe that for 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, 2025. I do not believe that at all. Come on. Oppression of the... And then white women is oppressed in 1970. Are you out of your flipping mind? Now, certainly 2025, that sounds extra retarded with white women dominating universities, colleges. Oh my goodness, Taylor Swift. But even for 1970, like, you're not going to tell me that the Leroy, Lakeisha, we know you minorities are oppressed, and we white women and white lesbians are too. Get that right there. You done let me know. Matter of fact, that's twofold for Fuller. One, you done let me know all I need to know. If this is the behavior of the white people who are not racist, and on all accounts, when it's time to deal with racism, well, it ain't just racism now. We got to deal with how they done mistreated old lesbian white Winnie. What? And that's the distraction. We don't want to talk about racism. We got to get to the rainbow, the LGBTQ, Harvey Milk, Got to get some anti-sex in it. We got to get some anti-sex in there. Anyway, I'll pause there. Other folks, commentary. Write a note. We should have extra time. They got K in the... They go, wait a minute, I'm going to give one more in quick. They said they vow to show their white skin privilege and work as North American anti-imperialists under the leadership of black and brown people. What? Let's see if that exists here. I certainly don't see that mirrored by other white people. None that I've talked to. Jane Elliott, Tim Wise, none of them. We white women say no to America, where white is a badge of acceptance of daily murder. They declared if that's what it is, white people are not ignorant, blind, or unaware that being classified as white means perpetual war and killing of non-white people worldwide. They know this. They know this. They can read the paper. What's going on right now? We're going to get them narco-terrorists. Do you think those people look like Boris Johnson? Come on. We're going to get to it. I don't think those people look like nobody on the cover of the book we are reading right now. Tonight, we bombed the U.S. Capitol. I bet none of them look like them narco-terrorists that they say we got to get down in the Caribbean and Venezuela. Donald Trump and them. Katherine, Massey Book Club. If you have comments, write them down. We will have time to get to you. We'll get to audio segment number 2, still in chapter 1. Katherine, Massey Book Club.
After she returned from Cuba, Susan found work as a drug counselor at the city-run Lincoln Hospital in the South Bronx. From its beginning in the early 1970s, conflict swirled around the hospital's drug treatment program, known as the Lincoln Detox Center. The program included an acupuncture collective run by Mutulu Doc Shakur, born Gerald Wayne Williams, who was close to the Black Panthers and the Young Lords. Shakur was also involved in the Republic of New Africa, or RNA, a Pan-African revolutionary movement trying to carve out an independent black homeland from 5 states that made up the old Black Belt in the Deep South. The RNA saw itself as a state in being, complete with elected officials and its own consulates in cities such as New York, Washington, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Their slogan, "Free the Land." In 1970, RNA Minister of Defense Henry Hatches declared, "We have entered the era of self-defense." Mississippi Attorney General A.F. Summer was apoplectic about the RNA. There was the whole homeland business, but much more troubling was the RNA's audacity to carry weapons in public. For people like Summer, the Second Amendment applied to whites only. There was an armed insurrection underway, Summer insisted. He appealed to the Nixon White House for help. Some functionary called over to the FBI. The Bureau's boss, J. Edgar Hoover, hated black separatists and all other disruptors of the racial status quo, including nonviolent organizations such as the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The Bureau called the RNA and the Panthers black nationalist hate-type organizations and deemed them worthy of heavy surveillance, electronic eavesdropping, and aggressive counterintelligence measures designed to disrupt their operations. The Bureau knew about Doc. Back in 1969, he'd spoken at length, and apparently wittingly, with an FBI special agent, telling the agent all about the RNA's convention in Detroit the previous year, when a local cop had been shot in a scuffle outside a church meeting hall. Shakur said he told the Motor City cops that he had nothing to do with it, but they hauled him off to jail anyway. However, the police couldn't make anything stick, so he was released and soon he was back in Jamaica, Queens. Shakur had a doctorate from an organization called the Institut d'Acupuncture du Québec in Montreal. His instructor, a Romanian refugee named Oscar Wehu, taught an acupuncture style the Chinese had used to fight the mass opium addiction that had come with British imperialism. In the Bronx, Doc touted the technique as a powerful, non-chemical alternative to methadone, an opioid used to wean addicts off heroin, which was ravaging the South Bronx and other parts of the city. Methadone, Shakur and others claimed, was the poisonous fruit of an ongoing conspiracy to chemically enslave poor black and brown people. According to White Lightning, an organization of ex-addicts, armies of slumlords, script doctors, organized crime, greedy drug companies, methadone pushers, corrupt cops, and producers of rot-gut wine are plundering our communities. Susan learned acupuncture under Doc's tutelage and eventually earned a degree from the Institute in Montreal. She was one of Doc's favorites, a youthful protege who shared his medical interests as well as his political ideology. Doc's agenda included more than getting ghetto residents off heroin. He also wanted to turn them into forces for the revolution. Toward that end, Shakur and his comrades handed out tracts such as The Opium Trail, Heroin and Imperialism, and lectured drug-addled patients about the systemic political and social evils that underlay their addiction. National liberation in Africa was also a hot topic. Lincoln organized concerts and fundraisers for the Zimbabwe African National Union, or ZANU. Robert Mugabe, a leader of one of the movement's factions, would come to power in 1980. Lincoln detox started attracting attention, much of it unwanted. Lyndon LaRouche, the leader of an increasingly violent right-wing political cult, learned about the detox program from one of his followers who worked on the hospital's staff. Like the left-wing acupuncturists at the South Bronx Hospital, LaRouche believed there was a conspiracy afoot. But in his view, Lincoln Detox was a product, not a victim of the master plan. He believed that the treatment program was part of an elaborate demonology that included the Central Intelligence Agency, Governor Nelson Rockefeller's political henchmen, the Federal Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, and even the British royal family. One of LaRouche's many obsessions was brainwashing, a technique he believed his enemies were using to create Manchurian candidate-style automata programmed for political assassinations. LaRouche personally handled the deprogramming of one hapless disciple suspected of being part of an assassination plot against him. A tape recording of the session captured sounds of sobbing, retching, and a sinister voice that issued a chilling command: "Raise the voltage." According to LaRouche, Lincoln Detox had created legions of ghetto zombies poised to be exploited by his many perceived enemies on the left. Like Shakur and his comrades, LaRouche hated methadone, but for starkly different reasons. According to one LaRouche publication, white communities were under threat from gang members, welfare loafers, and methadone-crazed dope fiends. On May 15, 1974, members of a LaRouche group, the U.S. Labor Party, or USLP, held a press conference at the hospital to expose the sinister doings inside its walls. Predictably, a fight broke out. The USLP claimed that Lincoln Detox staff members led a crowd of 50 zombies to attack the Labor Party organizers, shooting, stabbing, and clubbing them. Lincoln Detox personnel said they had merely been defending themselves against LaRouche's goon squad. LaRouche and his underlings didn't succeed in shutting down the program. That came 4 years later, after Brooklyn Democratic Assemblyman, now U.S. Senator, Charles E. Schumer, among others, accused Lincoln Detox of widespread waste and fraud, including no-show jobs, dubious expenditures, and leakage of methadone from the hospital's inventory. Back in 1975, Lincoln Detox staffers had trashed the Lower Manhattan offices of the city's Health and Hospitals Corporation after the agency threatened to cut the program's funding. 3 years later, hospital administrators and city officials feared sabotage and more violence if they took any steps to rein in the program. But Shakur and his friends had gone too far. By now, mainstream opinion considered Lincoln Detox a taxpayer-funded playpen for left-wing lunatics. Mayor Ed Koch had had enough. He said that Shakur and his comrades had run Lincoln Detox like a red re-education center, with Che Guevara as their patron saint, with his pictures all over the wall. It wasn't a hospital. It was a radical cell. In November 1978, the mayor ordered city funding cut off and sent in the cops to shut the place down. After Lincoln Detox shuttered, Susan moved with Shakur to his new enterprise, the Black Acupuncture Advisory Association of North America, or BANA, whose offices were on the second floor of Shakur's 4-story brownstone at 245 West 139th Street in Harlem. Barbara Zeller, a medical doctor and activist, served as BANA's medical advisor. Her husband, Alan Berkman, also a physician, was another friend of Susan's from her stint at Lincoln Detox, and he dropped in from time to time. There were parties at the place where Susan met black nationalists, assorted activists, and former weather people, including Judy. Lincoln Detox was a bust, but for Susan and the others, the struggle would continue, and their vehicle would be the May 19th Communist Organization. 2. Crack the facade. As May 19th coalesced, 3 other women became part of the group's core. Sylvia Beraldini was born into a well-to-do Italian family in Rome on December 12, 1947. Sylvia's father was a brooding presence in the household. He'd spent 7 years as a prisoner of war after being captured in Ethiopia, and the experience had scarred him mentally and physically. Still, Sylvia and her sisters had a great childhood. "I lived a very privileged, protected life," she said. This pampered existence didn't last, though. There was some kind of reversal in the Beraldini family's fortunes, and when Sylvia was 12, they all left for the United States as economic migrants. There were a couple of tough years up in the Bronx, and then a relocation to Washington. Sylvia hated parochial school, and she persuaded her parents to send her to the local public high school, Woodrow Wilson, in Northwest D.C. She described herself as an outsider. In 1965, Sylvia enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, an emerging center of student radicalism. She was anti-war, anti-racist, part of what was called the movement. She joined Students for a Democratic Society, and she heard Black Panther Party Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton speak on campus. After Chicago cops gunned him down on December 4, 1969, Sylvia, like thousands of other students, was outraged. It seemed as though the state was at war with its own people. The government would stop at nothing to kill the movement, she said. Later, she joined a weather underground front called Prairie Fire, and she was one of the few outsiders trusted by the violent Puerto Rican separatist group Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, or FALN. Unlike Sylvia, with her once pampered lifestyle, Donna Joan Borup had a modest childhood in South Amboy, a small New Jersey town that she left right after high school. She moved to New York, earned a bachelor's degree, and got jobs as a graphic artist, and taught part-time at Cooper Union. According to the FBI, she was a speed reader with a photographic memory and an IQ of 164. Susan Vicky Tipograph also linked up with the group in New York City. Born in Brooklyn on October 12, 1950, she grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey. Tip, as she was nicknamed, was a slightly overweight, bespectacled tomboy, according to one newspaper profile. In college, the Vietnam War and the killing of students at Kent State and Jackson State pushed her to the political left. "As the years went by, I got more and more radicalized," she said. "I realized there were people in the world who were fighting for their liberation." After graduating from New York Law School in 1975, she passed the bar and set up shop, specializing in criminal defense work. As a movement lawyer, she took on radical clients. She can be as charming in conversation as she can be ferocious in the courtroom, according to another profile. Sylvia, Susan Rosenberg, and another woman, Eve Rosan, wound up working as paralegals in Tip's law office, which was run as a collective. Tip and Susan were particularly close. The 2 women, a federal judge said, are more than just attorney and client. They have been associates, companions, and roommates. And then there was a 4th, secret member. Her exploits with the Black Liberation Army, her time behind bars, and her status as a federal fugitive have made her a legend among ultra-leftists. One of her comrades praised her as a bad sister, a woman totally about the get-down for the struggle. She was a major addition to the fledgling group that was forming as the women connected, and her arrival augured new revolutionary possibilities. Marilyn Jean Buck, born on December 13, 1947, grew up in Austin, Texas. The oldest of 4 children, she was the daughter of Virginia and Louis Buck. Her father, once a veterinarian, had become an Episcopal priest. The tall, 350-pound, sandal-wearing Reverend Buck cut an imposing, if eccentric, figure. His politics are even more unusual. He was a certified liberal and integrationist in a reactionary and segregated city. In Buck's opinion, his church didn't have the guts to take a stand and fight against American apartheid. He told his bishop that his fellow clergymen were wearing lace on their panties. Lewis drew national media attention in 1961 when he organized public protests against the exclusion of blacks from church-run schools. Local segregationists burned a cross on the Buck family's lawn. By the mid-1960s, Episcopal leaders finally agreed to integrate church institutions, but by then Buck had worn out his ecclesiastical welcome. The church had tired of his outspoken support for civil rights, his prickly personality, and his vaguely beatnik vibe, so they took away his parish. He returned to veterinary medicine and part-time work as a U.S. Department of Agriculture meat inspector. His wife, Virginia, went to work as a secretary. Still, life was good for the Buck family, which enjoyed a secure, upper-middle-class existence in mid-century America, complete with private school education for the children. Marilyn was an ideal mid-century American girl, pretty, personable, and fully in sync with the zeitgeist. She wanted to fit in, and she did, both at home and at St. Stephen's Episcopal School. She was in the Honor Society, worked on the school paper and yearbook, and joined the drama club. A knitting and crocheting enthusiast, she was also an excellent shot, having received firearms instruction from her father, an avid hunter. She harbored pre-marriage career ambitions to become a woman stockbroker, but it wasn't really what I was interested in, she said. At St. Stephen's, Marilyn graduated at the top of her class and got offers from Brown, the University of Texas flagship campus in her hometown, and the University of California at Berkeley. She picked Berkeley for its high academic standards, which was fine with her father, who was happy to have her avoid UT. Lewis was a liberal, but in his view, crazy student radicals were running the show in Austin. In 1965, 17-year-old Marilyn enrolled at Cal. It was her first time away from home. Apparently, her father hadn't been following the news. Berkeley, the home of the free speech movement, was the white-hot center of the country's left-wing student movement. The campus's turbulent politics aroused Marilyn's bred-in-the-bone sense of social justice. She made a lifelong commitment to waging war against what she called the war makers and white-skinned haters. Berkeley's freedoms were too much for her, Marilyn's mother said, after she saw the effect that her new environment had on her, insisting that she had been an innocent girl. Lewis agreed, and persuaded her to leave Berkeley after her first year. She transferred to UT and moved back in with her parents. Given her striking looks, considerable charm, and taste in knee-high boots, Marilyn no doubt drew the attention of the young men around Austin. She was stunning and statuesque, as someone described her. But she wasn't interested in distractions. In 1967, she was already committed to the Students for a Democratic Society. Nominally a Russian major, Marilyn didn't spend many hours curled up with Anna Karenina. The anti-war movement and the burgeoning countercultural scene took up most of her time. While campus Greeks were getting blitzed at keg parties, Austin's hippies were holding Gentle Thursdays. Marilyn marched steadily leftward. Stokely Carmichael, the fiery leader of the Black Power movement, spoke at UT in early 1967. At speeches at college campuses around the country, Carmichael had electrified audiences with blistering oratory that linked racism at home with the war in Vietnam. Why should black folks fight a war against yellow folks so that white folks can keep a land they stole from red folks? He said in 1966. Ain't no Viet Cong ever called me nigger. She did manage to find time for Robert Purdon, a Students for a Democratic Society organizer, and when he decided to move to Chicago in March 1967, Marilyn went too. She got a job in the SDS National Office, where she co-edited the group's newsletter, New Left Notes. By July, Marilyn had won a seat on the SDS National Administrative Committee and begun attracting FBI attention that would persist for nearly 2 decades. In 1968, Bureau officials considered placing her on the Agitator Index, a list of more than 1,000 radicals deemed worthy of special Bureau scrutiny. But even as she continued to find work among the young radicals she admired, she was still a lonely feminist voice within the male-led, macho SDS organization. At a national conference, Marilyn walked on stage to deliver a report on women and revolution. A foul-mouthed, jeering chorus greeted her. One SDS member recalled that men hooted and whistled, threw paper planes at the stage, and shouted out such gems as, "I'll liberate you with my cock." Preternaturally calm and apparently unfazed, she ignored the sexist abuse and finished her presentation. The Vietnam War was heating up. Nearly 500,000 U.S. troops were in the country. The Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army were racking up hundreds of American casualties every week, and a large swath of the Vietnamese population was on the receiving end of U.S. artillery fire, napalm, and air-delivered 500-pound bombs. On October 21, 1967, Marilyn joined more than 100,000 anti-war protesters at the Pentagon. On the nightly news, all of America saw a parading rabble of peace creeps, potheads, and assorted deadbeats. But the protest also included habit-clad nuns, suited and sober Protestant preachers, and literary figures such as Allen Ginsberg, Robert Lowell, and Dwight MacDonald. The irrepressible Norman Mailer, also in attendance, described the Pentagon as it came into view. The building rose like an anomaly out of the sea from the soft Virginia fields, its pale yellow walls reminiscent of some plastic plug coming out of the hole made in flesh by an unmentionable operation. For the anti-war throng assembled outside, the Pentagon was the ultimate symbol of an increasingly deranged U.S. military, a force that seemed hell-bent on incinerating the Vietnamese people, or, for that matter, anyone else who resisted the rampaging American golem. To the protesters, the five-sided structure seemed to throb with pure evil. Hippies conducted ancient Aramaic exorcism rites in the hope of driving out war-making demons from the building. Floppy-haired activists dropped daisies into the bayoneted rifles wielded by the troops called in to deter potential mayhem. Secretary of Defense Robert S. McNamara, in the throes of a nervous breakdown, monitored the spectacle from the roof. After Marilyn's relationship with her SDS boyfriend ended, she left Chicago for the San Francisco Bay Area, familiar territory that had become the West Coast epicenter of political and cultural rebellion. In May 1968, she landed a job as a clerk at the U.S. Postal Service's Ferry Annex. A year later, she was fired for chronic absenteeism. It's not surprising she got the sack. She was deeply involved with Newsreel, a filmmaking collective specializing in political documentaries. A typical Newsreel offering: Garbage, 1968, a film about the agitprop antics of the Motherfuckers, a colorful New York anarchist horde. In the midst of a citywide sanitation workers' strike, the Motherfuckers visited Lincoln Center. Just a few years earlier, the master builder and power broker Robert Moses had bulldozed the vibrant Puerto Rican neighborhood of San Juan Hill to create a new home for the Metropolitan Opera and the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. The Motherfuckers went on a pre-planned rampage, dumping huge heaps of garbage at the entrances to the gleaming Culture Palace. The films didn't do much at the box office, but that was hardly the point. The filmmakers were provocateurs and cultural assassins who wanted to weaponize the medium. Unlike the consensus-oriented liberals who dominated mainstream American life, Newsreel wasn't interested in offering policy solutions. Rather, it wanted to showcase political, social, and economic evils and heighten the cultural contradictions. As Marilyn said, "In our hands, film is not an anesthetic, a sterile, smooth-talking apparatus of control. It is a weapon to counter, to talk back, and to crack the facade of the lying media of capitalism." In 1968, Marilyn helped helm a documentary about the Black Panther Party and later moved into a house owned by someone close to the party. She and some Panthers read Mao and screened political films such as The Battle of Algiers, the gripping, lightly fictionalized account of the Front de Libération Nationale's underground campaign against French colonial rule. For budding insurrectionists, the documentary provided operational as well as political inspiration. In the words of one cultural critic, The Battle of Algiers offered invaluable instruction in the language of communiques, organization of cells, placement of terror bombs, and the value of cop killing. Like many in her cohort, she romanticized Third World revolutionaries, but she wanted to do more than just cheer on the forces of national liberation. On an ideological level and practical level, we felt we had to become guerrillas. It was time to become an urban insurgent. In the early 1970s, the Bay Area's political landscape was rapidly destabilizing. The Symbionese Liberation Army, or SLA, led by Donald DeFries, an escaped convict who adopted the nom de guerre, Field Marshal Sinkyu Mitume, murdered Oakland's first black school superintendent, robbed banks, and kidnapped the newspaper heiress Patty Hearst. Like many terrorist groups, the SLA believed it was at war, but it was hardly an army. The organization never had more than 13 members. The SLA's slogan, "Death to the fascist insect that preys on the life of the people." The equally bizarre and violent Tribal Thumb group was led by another charismatic ex-con named Earl Lamar Satcher, who peddled a home-brewed ideology that fused socialism with Reichian sexual psychology. It had a ranch in Honeydew, 180 miles northwest of San Francisco. In a crass and crude account of life in the group, one former member recalled lots of revolutionary white girls, beautiful, non-armpit-shaving, sexy-ass sisters, and plenty of hot, hairy, revolutionary pussy. Tribal Thumb drew recruits from the SLA, the Black Panther Party, and Charles Manson's murderous family. Sarah Jane Moore, the would-be assassin who popped off around at the hapless President Gerald Ford in San Francisco on September 22, 1975, reportedly used the Honeydew Ranch for her target practice. Adding to the Bay Area's early 1970s derangement was the presence of the Black Liberation Army, or BLA. Eldridge Cleaver, the leader of a major Black Panther Party faction, had ordered his followers to forget the party's moves toward mainstream legitimacy, running for political office, community empowerment, and feel-good free breakfast programs for neighborhood kids. Cleaver's faction formed the nucleus of a new, loosely knit underground organization. It was time to start killing cops, Cleaver said. "This is retaliation for ongoing atrocities," said Black Liberation Army leader Sekou Odinga, formerly known as Nathaniel Burns. The old Panther slogan, "Off the Pig," was no longer mere revolutionary rhetoric. The new armed group expanded its list of targets to include the social undesirables preying on communities of color, including pimps, hoes, hoe walkers, trick walkers, bodyguards, tricks, dope pushers, and owners-operators of trick houses. Anyone found guilty will be dealt with. In San Francisco, BLA mayhem included a string of bank robberies and the attempted murder of Police Sergeant George Kowalski on August 27, 1971. 2 days later, a 9-person BLA team mounted an assault on the Ingleside Station House. Just before the attack, somebody set off a diversionary bomb blast at a nearby bank. Chaos ensued. A gunman killed Sergeant John Young with a shotgun blast to the chest. Another BLA guy drew his 9mm pistol, fired, and wounded Irene Groman, the station house's civilian clerk. The BLA team had brought a bomb with them but couldn't get the fuse to light. "Let's get the fuck out of here," one of them said. Incredibly, the Young murder case remained open until 2009, when 2 former BLA members, Herman Bell and Anthony Bottom, already serving life sentences in New York, pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter. Why would the BLA or any other revolutionaries attack a police station? According to former BLA member Sundiata Acoli, née Clark Edward Squire, cops weren't civilians or non-combatants. They were legitimate targets. The state was oppressing black people, and the pigs were soldiers for the state, Acoli said. In Terrorism as Strategy and Ecstasy, the scholar William F. May offered another explanation, that the plan was to assault the cops in order to invite government repression. Go for the police station, sharpen the contradictions, because the police will club indiscriminately in retaliation, and thus will radicalize the uncommitted masses. The Ingleside attack didn't seem to incite any of the masses, but the BLA kept going. The violent campaign would stretch far beyond the Bay Area. It was a coast-to-coast cop-killing conspiracy, according to one federal prosecutor. Semi-autonomous BLA cells targeted police officers in Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. The FBI grew increasingly alarmed by what it called the urban guerrilla terrorists. In an October 16, 1972 memorandum, the acting head of the FBI, L. Patrick Gray, warned about the BLA's apparent influence in prisons, ghettos, and many other areas of malcontentment, and urged full penetrative investigations of the BLA and its supporters, who were working to disrupt and destroy existing order in the United States. But the BLA was elusive and next to impossible for the FBI to infiltrate. The FBI also worried about the BLA's potential connection with dangerous foreign elements, particularly in the Middle East. The Bureau had received reports that unspecified Arab terrorists were training U.S. blacks in guerrilla operations, and that BLA might be involved in an Arab terrorist plot inside the United States, according to a May 17, 1973 memo. The Bureau reached out to the intelligence community, including the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. But the spies had next to nothing to report. FBI investigations involve the relentless accretion of details. After all, it isn't always clear a priori what information might ultimately prove relevant. During the Bureau's probes into the BLA, special agents unearthed countless nuggets, including reports that the group's Minister of War, name redacted, had played a bit part as a dope addict in the now classic 1972 blaxploitation picture Superfly. FBI, Black Liberation Army, New York, New York, May 2, 1973. 8. FBI FOIA release. New York City, according to one FBI report, was the Mecca of the BLA. On May 21, 1971, BLA gunmen carried out a drive-by machine gun attack that seriously wounded 2 police officers, Thomas Curry and Nicholas Benetti. The men were guarding the Riverside Drive apartment of Manhattan District Attorney Frank Hogan, who had prosecuted many prominent Black Panthers. 2 days later, Officers Joseph Piagentini and Waverly Jones answered a call in the Colonial Park Houses, a public housing complex built on the site of the old Polo Grounds in Upper Manhattan. Bell, Bottom, and a third BLA gunman, Albert N. Washington, ambushed them. Rounds smashed into Jones's head and back, killing him almost immediately. Piagentini pleaded for his life. The BLA members took their time, slowly firing 22 rounds into his body. It was a torture murder. "It's open season on the cops in this city," said the head of the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. All told, the BLA murdered at least 15 policemen. Marilyn started working again with former BLA comrades in the late 1970s, and she brought some of the May 19th women along with her. On October 20th, 1981, the renewed partnership carried out its most notorious operation, a botched armed robbery in upstate New York that left 3 men dead.
Katherine, Massey Book Club. We will resume Chapter 2 next week. The subsection, the FBI and local cops had long suspected that Maryland was mixed up with the BLA. That's what in the San Francisco police. We even got the Symbionese Liberation Army has returned. How about that? Man, I have to go back and process in my brain computer because there is no way we needed to read this book way back when. It was mandatory. We had to read Jonestown first. So this is not the first time we have heard. Remember Donald Freeze? C.O.W.S. Michael Mayer said, hey, I think this Donald Freeze dude is in the CIA. Symbionese Liberation Army. They had a whole lot of white people in that group too. Remember that? He said that whole group, in fact, that was a prison group in Northern California that was for black males that was taken over by C.O.W.S. and mostly white people and then renamed the Symbionese Liberation Army. Sue Africa and Move might end up popping up in this book as well because they were in the Jonestown book too. Not all white people is racist? Number 720-716-7300, decode 564943, pound, press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Not all white people is racist. Again, I'm just keep asking as we read. So all of this, does this count? Any of what we're hearing? We got to get arms. We with the Black Liberation Army. Whatever needs to be, by any means necessary. Any of this sound like, hey, this is what I would expect of a white person who is not a racist and, in fact, serious about replacing white supremacy with justice, as some of them say they are. Let us know what you think. Just started with the book. We'll be on it for at least a couple of weeks or so. Let's see. I will finish up email number 1 and then see if folks, if you have commentary, questions, thoughts to share, star 61. Do not wait until the last moment. Let's see. I'll finish up the first email that I was reading and get some of my own thoughts as well. Let's see. Okay. Picking up in chapter 1, number 7. The Lincoln Detox Center acupuncture Assata Shakur methadone was used liberally at Rikers Island for detox from opiates during the 1970s and 80s. Incarcerated just had to ask to be put on it. Those involved with the center believe it was shut down due to success and was perceived as a threat because it was successful and was not under the control of racist white supremacists. See of Part and Parcel, Dr. Assata Shakur and the Lincoln Detox Center by Ina E-A-N-A. Ina Ming, M-E-N-G. 8. Black Acupuncture Advisory Association of North America. Parties at the place. I wonder if she engaged in any tragic arrangement activity. Hey, they've already told you that they had all this revolutionary and rowdy sex and hot hairy pee and all the rest of it. So it would be strange, peculiar, if that were not happening, given the environment. I mean, it's anti-sex this and lesbian that and all the rest of it. So yeah, given what we've heard just in the first chapter and a half, I'd say it would be a little strange if that were not a part of the plan and the confusion. But we'll keep an eye out, because we just started in the book, so they might be explicit and spill more beans as we proceed. Let's see. Much obliged for the email untiljustice@gmail.com, and then star 61. Folks have thoughts, observations to share if you get done munching that turkey, giblets, stuffing, and have a thought to share. Let me see. I'll go back and get some of my own observations, highlights, and then see if other folks have anything to share before we wrap it up for our first installment. Let's see. Okay. I got that part. Went too far. Let's see. Susan Rosenberg say her parents sent her to the progressive Walden school. I don't know what progressive means in this context. I don't know how many Negro children were at the progressive so-called Walden school. Let's see. And even, in fact, what they said, she was at the progressive Walden School, not far from their Upper West Side apartment. Students were on a first-name basis with their teachers. No grades were handed out, and the school stressed personal expression over competition. That reminded me so much of Mary Kay. They mentioned the John Birch Society, and her dad was in that as well. There's lots of Mary Kay overlap here, and even California, but That was like, because Mary Kay had her students calling her on a first name basis and the same sort of thing, de-emphasize grades and everything. I don't know, maybe this was a grooming environment too. I don't know. Let's see. So they talk about the Republic of New Africa, and we've entered an era of self-defense. Like all of that, is going to be shut down immediately. So there was the whole homeland business, but much more troubling was the RNA's audacity to carry weapons in public. That's for white people. For people like Sumner, the Second Amendment applied to whites only. Duh. There was an armed insurrection underway. Sumner insisted. He appealed to the Nixon White House for help. Some functionary called over to the FBI. And you see this happen over and over again, not just in this time period, but right now. Remember the group Not Effing Around, and they were doing kind of the same thing 50 years later, having these like public insurrectionary marches with firearms, and we're not going to take it, whitey, and all this, and then they ended up being charged, like federal indictments and such, looking at all these major charges for criminal activity, mostly with firearms. I've said white people got no trouble dealing with Negroes with guns, and the record shows this over and over and over. The bureau boss, J. Edgar Hoover, hated black separatists. Pause. Wrong. He hated black people. And this is another one. I'm so glad we had Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly on the program. I just said we had Jeffrey Haas, Haas, as a guest on the program. We talked about COINTELPRO in Chicago specifically, and then we had Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly on to talk about his book, Racial Matters, the FBI's Secret War Against Black America, and he talked about the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover hated black people. Dr. O'Reilly, he told us, he said, man, they knew, white people, that black people, their loyalties are suspicious because black people are treated like garbage, so they're all suspect. That was one of the main points Dr. O'Reilly kept emphasizing. It's not black separatists were hated and under surveillance. If you were black, period, you were under surveillance and hated. Like, you don't have to be you could be a member of the NAACP. You're under surveillance. In fact, you don't even have to be a member of the NAACP. Go to a meeting. Mention them. That's enough. You don't have to be a member of the Nation of Islam. You don't have to be a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. You don't have to be a member of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. You don't have to be a member of the Black Panther Party. None of the above. Just be a Negro. That's more than enough. Racial Matters, Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly. We talked about that book on 2 different programs. Super important. Dr. Welsing, she recommends that book at the beginning of the ISIS papers for a reason. Let's see. Shakur going to Montreal. They talk about them Canadians going over here and training some nigger in your spooky arts. Come on. Say, that he learned his style of acupuncture from Oscar Wexu, who taught acupuncture in the style the Chinese had used to fight the mass opium addiction that had come with the British imperialism system of white supremacy, racism, and again, just part and parcel. Domination over dark people, we're going to have to use some narcotics, get them so their brain computer is not working correctly, keep them distracted, they're not virile, and at their best, strongest, to oppose and hopefully successfully counter white supremacy, racism. Oh no, that's not what we want. Let's see. And they said Lightning, an organization of ex-white, according to WIT, Lightning, an organization of ex-addicts, armies of slumlords, script doctors, organized crime, greedy drug companies. Wow, we're talking about them now. Dump all that opioids and such on us, methadone pushers, corrupt cops, and producers of gut rot wine. I said, oh my Lord, is they talking about the Mad Dog 2020? Is that what they talking about? That same time period, Dr. Myers, they ain't talking about them Mogan David. Oh my Lord, the gut rot wine. Oh, and they put that gastrointestinal cancer on you because they did say you get more than one drink per week, and it might not even be one if you're going to get the gut. If you get the Mad Dog 2020, that's probably one per month. Anything beyond it, oh yeah, you're going to have all kinds of gastrointestinal cancers. Let's see. Lyndon LaRouche is furious about the detox centers. Says we got all these Negro zombies. That's not this book, but oh man, there's so much scholarship going back like decades about Negro zombies. Like that's what white people said about basically all of the island of Haiti, so-called. They made whole movies about that. Night of the Living Dead. Like, oh, some people even said that's The Walking Dead, the comic book and the TV show. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But because zombies don't have no brain computer, they say the Negro can't think. That's even really Jeff Dahmer, see, Wisconsin, stealing nigga. They said Sylvia Baldini went to Madison, University of Wisconsin. See, but old Jay Dahmer say he up trying to make these old zombies and he's drilling down in their head and all that. See, and he mostly getting non-white people, black people, Laotian boys too, but mostly non-white people. See, white. What does it mean to be white? Let's see. But he said LaRouche said they got the Lincoln staff got a crowd of 50 zombies to attack the latent zombie. Are you serious? Are you serious? Zombie, come on. And even some of this is in White Out. We had a white male guest on the program, I guess not way back, but 2023, same year as Jeffrey Haas, same summer, in fact. And we were talking about David Herzog. Might be mispronouncing his last name. This is a white male. And he was talking about how white people got access to these sorts of programs to help deal with their drug problem, and they got the help that they needed, where black people did not. They got stigmatized as zombies and crackheads. Ugh. They said that too, the crackhead zombies. You got these crack baby zombies. Let's see. They called it a red re-education center with Che Guevara as their patron saint with his pictures all over the wall. That's even one of the... Is that true? Did they have... Not that I think is a problem with that, yay or nay, but just they make up and lie all the time. Like, is that true even? Let's see. When they were talking about Donna Joan Borup, some of these other white people who joined, maybe another white person who is not racist. They said that she was a speed reader, had a photographic memory, and an IQ of 164, whatever that means. I was thinking of the whole Stanford phrenology history of, really, I just said, Negroes can't think. That right there, that's the whole history, a so-called IQ score, that I'm so smart. My score is about 1 billion points higher than you old no-count Negroes. What Dr. J.B. Watson had just said, that, see, these old Negroes, they got that low IQ. Ain't no point in investing in none of these dark people in Africa because they're just dumb and stupid. See? Hey, you, same thing. Go see, you look at their IQ score. You can't do nothing about that. See? And I even thought it was significant. They got to talking about Donna Borup and some of these other white chicks, and talking about how they were so attractive and such. I already mentioned Mary Kay. We hear any book that we read where the focus is on white women, there has got to be an emphasis on blonde. It might even be significant. I don't think any of these white chicks who are not racist, allegedly, I don't think any of them are blonde. We'll have to go and look. The photo on the front cover is in black and white, and I'm told I'm not the bad. I don't know my colors that well, especially picking out white women's hair colors, and now they got all the dye and stuff, and it's someone more intelligent than I. But it looks like most of these folks might be what they call brunette, might have darker hair, if that means anything. But I don't know that we've heard anyone thus far, any of these white women described as blonde, unless I'm reading sloppy. But attractive, I did hear. I ain't been that sloppy, because I did hear attractive. And talking about this, she's so striking, and all the boys in Texas just, ooh. It doesn't matter if that we're talking about a white woman who is going to blow up the Capitol building. Doesn't matter if we're talking about a white woman who's going to go drown children and blame it on the black boy. Doesn't matter if we're talking about a white child rapist woman. It doesn't matter. We're going to have to pause before we get to whatever their criminal exploits are to acknowledge this is a good-looking white woman. Woo, she is just stunning. Look at them legs. Why do we do that when we talk about black people, non-white people, period? Especially when we get to talk about non-white criminals. Do we have to pause and talk? Man, that Orenthal James is a handsome dude. Woo-wee. Man, got them soft eyes and that wavy hair, boy. I do not remember Tubin saying all that. It's been a minute since we read that, but I swear, I remember him taking time to talk about how illiterate O.J. Simpson was and putting that whole letter as his coon can't even read. Look at that. Told you they can't think. You got these old zombies. I remember that. I don't remember no pause. Boy, that is a handsome black man right there. Woo! Get him on GQ. Man, look at that. Got them shoulders. White women. Especially if they blonde. Especially if they're blonde. Let's see. They said when Marilyn Buck's father, apparently he also might be a white person who is not racist, said when he organized public protests against the exclusion of niggers from the church-run school. We don't want the church don't want to educate nigger children. No. Why is that? Religion of white supremacy. Local segregationists. They can't say racist. Local racists burned a cross on the Buck family's lawn. That's the religion of white supremacy. And that's one more time, Neely Fuller Jr. He said, if you are classified as white, you can't be ignorant about racism. Now, see, they didn't say that they had straws over their eyes so they couldn't see that cross being burned. They didn't say that they had straws up their nostrils so they couldn't sniff the flames, the ember. They didn't say that. They said, oh, my goodness. Do you know what? Dad went out here acting like he want to educate these nigger children, and they said, we don't educate no nigger children. You gonna get your act together, Buck family. White people can't be ignorant about racism. White people will let you know you messing up. You messing up. You gonna get in trouble. I hadn't even heard that before. They burn a cross on a white person? Like, woo! They will let you know. Get your act together. Let's see. Oh, that's where it is. With the Buck child. Say, Marilyn Buck, B-U-C-K, giving her striking looks, considerable charm, and taste in high-knee boots. Are you serious? I just don't remember them talking about, boy, Orenthal James came in there, boy, he had them cufflinks on, them new gaiters, and woo, that is a good-looking black boy. I don't remember all that. Do you remember that, Jeff Tubin? Because I do not. I know it's been some years, but I remember that nigger did it. Man, come on. Anyway, he say, while they were going to school and doing their protests and kegger parties and such, they said the Greeks were getting blitzed at keg parties. Is that a synonym for getting drunk? The binge drink, getting blitzed? That's German, isn't it? They use that word for everything. We blitzed them. Don't they say that at the tackle football game? And they say Nigger Friday. Boy, we went out there and we blitzed them stores. Well, that's what they say, right? And then they say we were getting blitzed. That means we drunk a whole kegger, passed out, got the alcohol poisoning. Let's see. Said the white members were yelling out, "I'll liberate you with my penis." What? Now, I don't know if H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael got accused of saying such a thing during the Black Panther Party, and if black females, non-white females, attempted to speak. I haven't heard that. Maybe that happened too. You know, them privileged black males. Let's see. They talked about the protesters against the Vietnam War, that they saw a parading rabble of peace creeps, potheads, and assorted deadbeats. That remind me of January 6th. Didn't Mr. Dunn, Officer Dunn, former Capitol Police officer, he said all them January 6th protesters, white people, and Enrique Tarrio, said they were up there and they were puffing on the reefer and munching stachios, remember? Deadbeats. You got to be a deadbeat. You up there urinating in the Capitol and puffing reefer, trespassing, talking about got your zip ties, you gonna get Senator Representative Clyburn and Nancy Pelosi. Well, come on, you got to be a deadbeat. Pardon, deadbeat. Now, let's see. They mentioned the Symbionese Liberation Army, which I'm so glad we talked about in advance. Our timing was right and correct. Reading this book later. And I hadn't mentioned the sexual part before. It's right here when they bring up the Symbionese Liberation Army, the bizarre and violent tribal thumb group led by another charismatic ex-con named Earl Lamar Satcher. I'd never heard of this group or this person either, who peddled a home-brewed ideology that fused socialism, that's Jim Jones, and Reichian sexual psychology. And he's got the Honeydew Ranch 180 miles northwest of San Francisco, which, real talk, that is going to be kind of close to Ukiah and Mendocino County, where Jim Jones, started out when they first moved from Indiana. I mean, that's not exactly the same, but it's. I mean, even if it was in San Francisco, 180 miles, it would be close. But all that Mendocino County and all that is north of San Francisco. So this Honeydew place is kind of close. And they say that it was in a crass and crude account of life in the group. One former member recalled lots of revolutionary white girls and armpit shaving sexy ass sisters and all this sex, the distraction, and of course the anti-sex. We already got that, the lesbians and all the rest of it. See, I'm really tripping out because I think this is the second time, this might be 2 books in a row that have mentioned directly, indirectly, Sarah Jane Moore. I literally had never heard of her. Seattle International Film Festival this year, documentary film on her. The filmmaker was there, and it's the same thing. That the cowbell, she was in a sexual relationship with a black dude in the Black Panther Party, and she was supposed to be reporting back on what they were doing, and she had a so-called handler and all this, and then she ends up taking a shot at Gerald Ford. But that's unto aside. That document is called Suburban Fury, but she is the main. It just has her sitting chilling. She's not in prison. She's not shackled. My man, Mr. Al-Amin, he died in prison. He didn't take no shot at the president. And they did accuse him of killing that sheriff. He said he didn't do that. Sarah Jane Moore bragged, let it be known, yes, I tried to kill the president. Wish I had been a better shot. She didn't die in prison. What do it mean to be white? And that's a cowbell that comes up in the film. What? And I think the Symbionese Liberation Army, Jesus Christ. Anyway, man, I can't even think of a time where it was a film that I didn't even know about and I just watched on a one-off, and it became more and more important after I saw it. Like, wow. Anyway, that's Suburban Fury, Sarah Jane Moore. Suburban Fury. They so-called Black Panther Party, I thought this was really important. They said the new armed group, this is the Black Liberation Army, Cleaver's faction away from the Black Panther Party. He says that the new armed group, they had an expanded list of targets that included preying on anyone preying on community socially undesirables, preying on communities of color, including pimps, hoes, hoe walkers, trick walkers, bodyguards, tricks, dope pushers, and owners operators of trick houses. Anyone found guilty will be dealt with. Now this sounds very much like what I would expect, one, from an operation that has been distracted, maybe intentionally, by some provocateurs or what have you, individuals who have been ordered by white people, racist, hey, you get in there, and we're not going to be talking about no off the pigs or even a breakfast program. We won't be talking about we're going to go and get these other black people that's messing us over, because that happens so frequently. We're going to go and get these black. We got some, Uncle Toms. We got some sellouts that need to be dealt with. And then they go and start messing over black people. And that also gives, now we got a reason, because you all are committing crime. It may even be some black people that ask us to come and do something about these Panthers. They coming out here and knocking black people upside the heads, talking about they sellouts and all this other old stuff, that type of thing. Let's see. In Terrorism as a Strategy and Ecstasy, the scholar William F. May offered another explanation about why the Panthers say we're going to off the pigs and start this campaign of killing police officers, that the plan was to assault the cops in order to invite government repression, go for the police station, sharpen the contradictions because the police will club indiscriminately in retaliation and thus will radicalize the uncommitted masses. Where is this written down at amongst the black people? And even if it is, like, oh man, that is not thought out logical at all. It had already been attacks on the police by black people at this point, and even just attacks, counter-violence as a result of white supremacy racism. It did not so-called radicalize the uncommitted, whatever that means. We go out, if I'm understanding this, we, Black Liberation Army or whomever, we go out and kill some enforcement officials. All of the black people who are confused or afraid or unwilling to do anything about white supremacy racism, this, and particularly once they see the response where enforcement officers go out and just start randomly killing and smacking black people around and putting them in jail, this will not further terrorize them and alienate our group. This will inspire large numbers of uncommitted black people to be willing to risk their lives to replace white supremacy with justice and support our group. That is absolutely retarded. VGQ, if any legitimate black people or non-white people did think that, but that is out of this world retarded, and there's so many examples even by this time period that you know that is not what's going to happen at all. At all. And if you don't know, you should. If anything, sounds like what I just said, where you have an environment where white people can easily manipulate any of their victims. Just go grab one. Leroy, you get in there and go tell them, this is the new plan. This is what we thinking we ought to do. Any of these whole sellout black people, we get them, and then we kill off a few cops, and that'll really gin up, the broad black base, the folks who kind of on the fence metaphor, and they not really sure, and they don't know, they don't want to do no violence, and they like the Dr. King way. Once they see what happens and police start just cracking random, see their son get knocked down, I know my son ain't had nothing to do with it, that's going to really inspire them to get it. What? It further makes me question, because Rosenau, the author of this book, he quotes William F. May. He didn't quote H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Eldridge Cleaver, giving this bit of rhetoric that if we do this, this is what that. He didn't quote them. He quotes this, and I suspect it's a white scholar, William F. May. How did he come to this conclusion? Did he talk to some black people who said this? Anyway, and they say the BLA is this main threat and has all this influence in prison. I don't even know if that is true or not, especially at this late date. I think the Black Panther Party's influence had greatly waned by the mid-late 70s. Jim Jones even talked about that at that time period. That's why they absconded San Francisco. I cannot say enough. Do you see the nexus of all of this activity hitting the same area where the Black Panther Party started, San Francisco? Even some of these white group members, they went to Cal Berkeley. Didn't we hear these are the same? I was at Cal Berkeley last November. Go Bears. All of this is the same regions, even the Charles Manson family, all the same geographic regions, same time period, same people even. That is important. Dr. Welsing would even say connecting the dots, but massively important in my view, and even you can get a better grasp of connecting all of this and how all of this is happening at the same time, because, oh man, we've talked about some of these other events, even, dare I say, the Zebra, because they mentioned, oh man, they were so quick about it. When they mentioned the Symbionese Liberation Army, they said that Donald Friesen Q, he killed a black Oakland superintendent. Man, if you don't put a name on Dr. Marcus Foster, first black superintendent in the state of California at a major school, that was another one. Michael Myers said, I think Jim Jones might have had something to do with it because Jim Jones was recruiting children from this area. He even suggested that Dr. Foster may have been aware of Jim Jones accessing his school and his students and might have been working to kind of deny them access to coming in and recruiting at some of the schools that he had so-called authority over. That was submitted in Michael Mayer's book. But the Dr. Foster, that was massive. Like, oh my goodness, that was in all the black newspaper and the San Francisco Chronicle at that time period. They even talk about it now. They have whole books written about the assassination of Dr. Foster. But yes, that is one. Yeah, the official record. That is the Symbionese Liberation Army. They call it the Salt and Pepper murders because Dr. Foster got cyanide bullets. How Jim Jones, I don't even have nothing else to say. You can go check me on that. Is that true? Salt and pepper murders for Dr. Marcus Foster, and he actually got cyanide bullets. 2 people got shot. The black fella gets the cyanide bullet. The black fella got to drink the Kool-Aid. The white person who got shot, no cyanide, and he lived. Yes, I too think Jim Jones had something to do with Dr. Marcus Foster's assassination too. Anyway, we'll pick up there, Nick. I can't believe I did not want to read this book. And it's not even that long. Anyway, we will resume next Friday. Write in if you have thoughts, observations, especially if we have folks. You are in the not all white people are racist. Hey, we got a book of white people. They went out and bombed on behalf of Negro. And we got that whole chapter coming about, hey, we got to get Assata up out of prison. Do they count? We finna see. Saturday, compensatory call in 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Let us know how you made it through the so-called holiday, and we'll catch up on news observations from the past 7 days on the planet Eve. Let us know if you survived Negro Friday. That said, give my PSA, sobriety would be best. If you have imbibed the gut rot wine, you do not need to be out behind the wheel. They will probably have, at least in this part of the world, U.S., I guess they don't, if you're in Brazil or London or what have you, just, you can ignore all that. But for those of us here, they'll probably have sobriety checkpoints through Monday, I would think, at minimum. I would be parked, really. If you got to do any partying or anything like that, you got relatives, or if you're back, maybe you're in school and you're back home, you want to go hang out with your friends, I would get to one location and stay there. I would not be, we got to drive all over town and go here and go there. Like, oh man, you do not want to have unplanned contact with armed enforcement officers 10:30 at night, 11:30 at night, midnight. The later it gets, the worse it goes. Like, you do not want any of that. Where they, whoops, what we done found in your car here. Oh no. Get to one spot and stay there. You can leave safely, sober in the morning. But at minimum, you do not want to be out and about on the road. And even at minimum, even if you don't get that sobriety checkpoint, hey, many people throughout the so-called holidays do drink and drive. They are also a hazard on the road, and particularly after it gets dark. Sober. Gut rot wine. We do not need no more of the gastrointestinal cancer. Get some water with no lead in it, and we'll be doing great for 2. I did a dry December. We're going to do dry November, dry January, and just ride it all the way out until justice. Creator, we ask, unless this book is out of this world in what we get convinced and can change our mind, please remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Remind us, Stop name-calling people classified as black. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cow signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed. I'm a victim, brother. Problem. You're a victim. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning. Shut up. The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.